Right, at this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Our first step will be approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve.
I'll let Tessa decide who seconded. Is there any discussion? Tessa, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Sinclair,
Yes.
Commissioner Ostrander,
Yes.
Commissioner Orloff, Commissioner Bates, Commissioner Matusik,
Yes.
Vice Chair Moritz.
Yes. All right, let's move on to consideration of minutes. We actually have two sets of minutes. The first is for September 26th, 2024. Does anyone have any amendments to these minutes? Do I have a motion to approve? Nope.
I noticed I left Jay's name off the minute.
Oh, okay. Thanks for noticing that. So we'll amend for Commissioner Orloff. Any other amendments?
I feel like I usually catch those. I don't know how I missed that.
All right, do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve as amended. Seconded.
Any discussion? Tessa, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Orloff,
Yes.
Commissioner Matusik,
Yes.
Commissioner Ostrander,
Yes.
Commissioner Bates,
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair,
Yes.
Vice Chair Moritz.
Yes. All right, and now we're moving on to minutes from October 2nd, 24. Does anyone have any amendments to these minutes? No?
Everyone's
All right.
on this one.
Do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve. I'll second.
Any discussion?
I just like to comment, I like that you've got the timestamp for the YouTube throughout it. I'm sure that was a lot of extra work, but
It's me too.
okay, I really appreciate that's in there.
All right, Tessa, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Bates,
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair,
Yes.
Commissioner Ostrander,
Yes.
Commissioner Matusik,
Yes.
Commissioner Orloff,
Yes.
Vice Chair Moritz.
I actually was not there, so I will abstain from this. I wasn't present at the meeting, so I'll have to abstain from. At this time, we will be moving on to public comment. I will be taking comment on any issue that might be within the purview of Planning Commission. Please know that if you are planning to speak regarding a public hearing agenda item, your comments will be considered during that public hearing agenda item during that portion of the program. Does anyone have public comment that they would like to present?
But it's a work session item. Do I wait till then or?
You have to wait till that item.
Hi. Andrew Tonry, PO Box 664. Thought about being windy and adding statistics and history and reasoning, but I don't think it matters right now. Before you tonight, you have two proposals, one for trees, one for housing. I think the tree proposal goes much too far, while the housing proposal doesn't go far enough. It's time to get them right round.
Does anyone else wish to make public comment? At this time, we'll move on to the agenda. Item number 1, public hearing V 24-07 and SR 24-03. CEDA requesting a variance and setback reduction. CEDA application for a variance to off-street parking requirements and a reduction of the required front yard setback in conjunction with the Cannon Beach Elementary School rejuvenation project. The property is located at 268 Beaver Street in an institutional zone. These applications will be reviewed against the criteria of CBMC 1790 variances and 1764 setback reduction. Does anyone object to the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission to hear this matter at this time? Does any commission member believe he or she has a conflict of interest or personal bias? If you don't
Eric,
mind,
you're not going to speak up, Eric?
I don't believe I have a personal bias on the setback reduction or the parking requirement. I believe my comments that I've made in my run for candidacy are in relation to the funding sources and whether or not I believe this project fits into the community. And I don't think that has any bearing on whether or not I can apply the criteria of this application to setback reductions and the parking requests.
I suppose I was just wondering, is it true that your spouse filed the lawsuit that delayed this project?
She did file the lawsuit that allowed this project to go to a vote. And it was not just this project, it was all three projects that were being proposed to be funded.
The reason we're here is an extension of an initial request that we did grant.
Mhm.
So I'm just wanting to make sure that you feel that because we're here due to delay, you're still able to view this in an unbiased way.
I believe I can view this in an unbiased way, based on the information that's in the packet and the information that's within our code.
Thanks. Do we have a staff report?
Yes, this is going to be very brief. The applicant CETA on behalf of the city of Cannon Beach requests a variance to exempt the city of Cannon Beach from meeting the minimum required off-street parking requirements. Additionally, a setback reduction request for the front portion of the property facing Beaver Street for the purpose of accommodating planned pedestrian improvements and amenities is requested. Both applications were previously approved by the Planning Commission in 2023. However, these authorizations expired as a building permit was not issued within 1 year of the date of approvals. The city is seeking to reestablish the same variances in order for the project to move forward. The initial evidentiary hearing on this matter was on September 26, 2024. This matter was continued at that time in response to a request from a member of the public. Any additional public comments, argument, and applicant rebuttals have been attached to the staff report. And during this 777 period, for the continuance period, only one comment was received on October 2nd, and that has been forwarded to the Planning Commission. No new evidence has been introduced, and at this time, the public record is closed.
Thank you. Because we've already closed the public record, we can move directly to deliberation. Who wants to start?
Does anyone want any type of information with regards to the 777 again? Bill is on,
Help.
and if you'd like, we could at least have him explain that real quick.
If that would be helpful,
If necessary, I mean, if not, that's fine.
that would be helpful.
Bill, would you mind just kind of explaining the 777 that we did on September 25th?
Sure, I'm trying to get my Zoom in place. Anyway, yeah, so as with any other quasi judicial matter, anybody can request a continuance or the record be left open. Given the 120-day deadline, what most cities do and what the Planning Commission has done is the opportunity that's set out in ORS 197-797 that essentially sets up a period of time that gives an open record for anybody to submit new evidence, then for anybody to submit rebuttal, and then for the applicant to submit final written argument. And once that happens, that allows you to come back and go directly into deliberations and not have to continue public testimony and possibly get a bunch of new material right before the hearing. And so that's basically where you are, is at deliberations. So happy to answer questions if you have any.
Thanks, Bill.
And can I, one more?
Sure.
And so the only information that we really received during that time was a letter from Anita Duber that just mentioned something I had done so with the hope that a new discussion would ensue along with the new application from CETA on behalf of the city of Cannon Beach for this large project. So there wasn't a lot of new evidence or testimony provided. So there's a lot, you pretty much, the commission pretty much has the original application that was presented before you.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind starting. I just don't see that anything has changed in the applicable law or code or in the city's response since that time. I see no point in delaying it. I think we should go ahead. I think they complied then or justified the variance in the setback then, and I think it's just.
I agree with you. I may not be part of that, but we do have precedent already in all regards, so.
Right.
Looking to oppose it.
So let me play a little bit of the opposite tack. So, presuming that we do grant the extension on these two things, and without speculating too much on what the future might hold, is there any condition where we might regret having done this? Do we have to reverse our decision if something should happen in the future?
If the referendum is defeated, I would think that this setback reduction and variance request would just go away.
That be fair statement?
What I would say is that if the plan commission approves them, they're good for a year.
But there's nothing to apply them to.
Right, if, you know, depending on finances and things like that, but if it doesn't go through, but just like any other applicant, you know, that would come before you, that may not have their finances all set up. They come to you, make the request, and if it's approved, they know that they can move forward. So what would happen? And so we're not necessarily granting an extension. It kind of is, it's acting on a new application, and that new application would be good for a year.
But see, without a building to go forward with,
Right,
permits would be.
right.
And yeah, and that's the answer to my question. I also don't see any reason why we would change our position at this time.
So I understand where we were at. I kind of feel the same way that I felt a year and a half ago when we first did this. There was slightly less than last time. During our last deliberation, I brought up that the fire department had not been contacted prior to that initial application. They have been contacted now. I feel like that has been satisfied. The concern I still have is that I don't feel that the application or the information in the packet has fully filled the parking or load of vehicles not interfering with the free flow of traffic on the streets when traffic's going to be coming from that right off of Hemlock into a loading zone that's within a dozen or so feet of there, with very limited shuttles in town and that sort of thing, with the expectation that 299 people can attend events like that. I don't feel it meets that criteria. And so I'm kind of in the same boat I was during our last deliberation, that I don't feel like it meets all the criteria. It does meet the fire department criteria if the road is widened. I'm also kind of concerned that it's going to be eliminating a couple of parking spots on the south side of the road if we're widening the pavement on that portion of the road as part of one of the conditions of approval that the fire department's requesting. So that's kind of where I'm at on that.
I appreciate that. I personally feel the same way that, again, I did a year ago, which is that the reasons that we granted this were very important in terms of the cultural importance of the site and what this allowed in the way of the use of the site. I understand the concern about traffic flow, but I do feel that that also has been addressed by CETA, was addressed a year ago. I don't think it's changed. Again, I do think it's important that we are applying criteria to a project and we're not doing this as a what if in the future. We take the project that's before us, not worrying about what's going to happen next. So to me, I don't have a concern about whether or not politically there's a fallout. Does anyone else wish to make comments?
Can I ask if we make motions to split these as two different things? I see no problem with the setback reduction. I don't see.
We can
It
ask
feels like
Bill
it.
if it's possible. Bill, this application came as one for the variance and the setback reduction. If someone wanted to vote separately on the two pieces, would that be possible?
Yes, the city is required to have a combined procedure where they can go through one process, but the city could end up approving one and denying the other. So separate votes is entirely possible. It looks like Robert has his hand up as well.
Yes, the staff report is written with both motions being separate.
Great. So if someone wants to give us a motion for one, and then we can do a motion for the second one.
I have to look at the language of that.
Sure, find the language for the motion.
Unless somebody's got it up, Les.
Well, I do have, it up, so, the motion as staff has recommended, reads, having considered the evidence in the record based on a motion by myself, Commissioner Sinclair, seconded by someone, the Cannon Beach Planning Commission moves to either approve or approve with conditions or deny the CEDA application for an off-street parking variance V 24-07 as discussed at this public hearing. And there are no conditions attached to that.
Which, are you making that motion?
I am making the motion that we approve variance 24-07.
Do we have a second?
A second.
On one of the motions, it may be worthwhile to include the condition that talks about paving the remaining portion of Beaver Street. So whether that's this one or the next
I
one.
think that's tagged to the next one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, it's the next. Okay, thank you.
Thanks for pointing that out. When we get there, we'll make sure that happens. Do we have any further discussion? Tessa, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Ostrander.
No.
Commissioner Bates.
Yes.
Commissioner Matusik.
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair.
Yes.
Commissioner Orloff.
Yes.
Vice Chair Moritz.
Yes. All right, so V 24-07 is approved. Now we are moving on to considering SR 24-03.
I'm happy to make a motion that we approve the CEDA application for a setback reduction 24-03. Subject to the condition that the city shall pave the currently gravel portion of Beaver Street right away in front of 267 and 269 Beaver Street in order to resolve fire access concerns identified in by the Cannon Beach Rural Fire Protection District.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Tessa, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Matusik.
Yes.
Commissioner Bates.
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair.
Yes.
Commissioner Ostrander.
Yes.
Commissioner Orloff.
Yes.
Vice Chair Moritz.
Yes. SR 24-03 is approved. We are going to move on to the next agenda item.
One question. One of the things that we were asking for was if staff would be able to draft the findings and then bring those to yourself to sign.
Yes, do we have a motion for the vice chair to sign the appropriate orders?
Absolutely. Yes, I move that the vice chair sign the appropriate order.
Second.
Any discussion? Tessa, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Orloff.
Yes.
Commissioner Bates.
Yes.
Commissioner Matusik. Commissioner Matusik. Commissioner Sinclair.
Yes.
Ostrander. Commissioner Matusik. Vice Chair Moritz.
Yes. On to the next agenda item. This is a legislative hearing regarding continuation of ZO 24-02. City of Cannon Beach request for a text amendment to Municipal Code, Chapter 1770, Tree Removal and Protection. Text amendment request will be reviewed against the criteria of Municipal Code 1760070A amendments, criteria, and the statewide planning goals. Does anyone object to the jurisdiction of Planning Commission to hear this matter at this time? Any commission member believe he or she has a conflict of interest or personal bias?
It is under advisement by the Oregon Government Ethics Commission Executive Director that I make statement of my conflict of interest regarding zoning order 2402. I do this not only to protect myself, but also my fellow commission members and to protect the impartiality of the Planning Commission as a whole. Taking a possible conflict of interest as noted by the City Council at our last session. I need to recuse myself from voting on text amendments. If any planning commissioners or city council members have any questions regarding to impartiality, the Executive Director of the Oregon Ethics Commission encourages you to contact her directly.
Thank you. Do we have a staff report?
Yes, the City of Cannon Beach Planning Commission is holding a evidentiary hearing regarding proposed changes to Municipal Code 1770, tree removal and protection. Proposed draft revision has been prepared by a citizen focus group with input from the community development and public works departments. The goals of the proposed revision are to codify public notice requirements to resemble the procedures used for removal of trees in the public right of way, remove certain criteria for removal such as landscaping or views, inserting requirements to consider geological hazards with tree removal applications where appropriate, expand the role of the city arborist, preserve significant trees where there are alternatives to removal, mandate the replacement of trees, reimbursement to the community for their removal, establish a community tree fund with restrictions on use, and change the enforcement process. During this hearing and possible future hearings on this matter, the Planning Commission will hear evidence regarding the proposal, conduct deliberations, and make a recommendation to the City Council regarding the proposed revision to the ordinance. This process is an opportunity for any interested parties to provide written and or oral comments to the Planning Commission and eventually the City Council before a final decision regarding the adoption of the proposed amendment is made. The date of the initial evidentiary hearing before the City Council is to be determined.
Thank you, Robert. Is there any additional correspondence that we have not already received?
No.
At this time, I'll be calling for public testimony. Persons who testify shall first receive recognition from the chair, state their full name and mailing address, and if appearing in a representative capacity, identify whom they represent. First, is there a presentation by the applicant?
May I speak on behalf of the group? I'll be very brief. My Sinclair P.O. Box 1394 here in Cannon Beach. Planning Commission, I'm making these comments as a member of the focus group that worked up the proposed tree code, not as a Planning Commission member or any other city responsibility that I might have. I mainly wanted to start with thanking all of the people who have been a part of this process. I look back in my records, our first meeting was June 26th of 2023. And I would say we've probably averaged at least 2 meetings a month, if not 3. It's been quite a bit of work. My fellow members on the focus group are Mike Bates, Stacy Benefield, Jan Siebert-Warman, and Lisa. I want to thank them for all of the hard work that they've put into this. I also want to acknowledge the contributions, both in terms of time and expertise, that has been provided by the city staff. Public Works, Community Development, our city arborists, and our city's legal representatives have put a lot of time and effort into looking at what we've come up with, and the product we've got today has benefited greatly from that. I also want to especially thank Mr. Gersbach and Ms. Killian of the Oregon Department of Forestry for their time and generosity. Their input has been really valuable and has helped us understand what we can and can't do, I think. And then finally, I want to publicly thank everybody that participated in this process. Public, the feedback we've gotten, nothing has gone past us without at least a review on our part and trying to understand how to make the product better. We're quite proud of what we've got to do. And I hope that we can continue to have a full discussion. I'm sure. But I think that it goes a long way toward achieving what we wanted to achieve. And I had a couple of comments I wanted to make that was based on feedback that we have gotten prior to this particular meeting. Much of which Robert captured in the staff comments. Actually, I appreciated that. We are asking for more involvement from our city arborist. That's been pointed out. There's some concerns about, overloading the city staff, but we feel like it's important that our city arborist weigh in on these kind of decisions. He's truly the only clearly unbiased person to make those kind of calls, because he is forbidden from being financially related to anything that he recommends. So he's the one expert who can truly be depended on to make that call. So we have asked for much more of his engagement than what we currently see when we recognize that. There still seems to be a lot of angst over the calculated value of a tree. And some of those numbers that you can come up with a large tree, these are big numbers. I grant you that. I think it's important to say that only is relevant in the case of a tree that is illegally removed. It has nothing to do with a tree that's taken out if it's got a permit. And within the city of Cannon Beach city limits, it is illegal to take any tree out without a permit. That's the way it is today. That's the way we propose that it stays. So I think maybe we don't clearly understand that is a truly large penalty, but it's only applied in the case where people or individual isn't following the rules. And I guess I wanted to make one more comment about that. The formula that we propose to calculate those values is actually the formula that's in our current code now. I don't see it really being enforced a whole lot, but it's already there. We haven't proposed anything new. So maybe that puts a little bit of a different spin on what we're trying to achieve. We're not trying to penalize anybody. It's just trying to. Anyway, I mainly just wanted to kind of thank everybody that's been a part of this. Appreciate the Planning Commission's time and look forward to a fruitful discussion.
Are there presentations by proponents? Jan?
I'm Jan Siebert Warman for the Cannon Beach Friends of Trees, care of P.O. Box 778, Cannon Beach 97110. Dear Planning Commissioners, I'm very grateful for my time as a citizen on the Cannon Beach Tree Focus Group. Tonight, I'm speaking for the Cannon Beach Friends of the Trees, who are dedicated to the growth, stewardship, and preservation of the trees of our community as a living legacy for present and future generations. Cannon Beach Friends of the Trees are in full support of the proposed, updated, and improved version of the Cannon Beach Tree Protection and Removal Ordinance of our municipal code. We would like to thank all of the many people who have helped strengthen and clarify our Cannon Beach tree ordinance. Trees are vital to the health and the beauty of our community. We need trees. Thank you.
Are there presentations by other proponents?
Jillian Jones?
So,
Jillian
yeah,
or Jennifer? She's up there.
yeah, yeah, there she is.
Oh,
She's muted.
I don't think her microphone's working.
Their lips there, though.
Mhm.
Can she call us? Steve, is there a way she can call in from a cell phone?
Is this better?
oh, yes.
Yes.
That's a lot better. Success.
Yeah. Doctor.
Can you hear
Hey,
me?
Jennifer.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, I apologize. I'm not sure what happened there. Good evening. My name is Jennifer Killian, and I'm a community assistance forester with Oregon Department of Forestry's Urban and Community Forestry Program. My goal tonight is, I believe many of you got my letter of support. I don't know.
Oh, before you keep going, if we could have your mailing address, please.
My mailing address would
It
be,
can be your work address.
yeah, it would be 2600 State Street, Salem, Oregon, and I don't know the zip code off the top of my head, but I can look it up right here.
Go for 97301.
That's the one. Yes, that's it. Sorry, I wasn't prepared with that.
Thank you.
So I've been asked to participate in this process, and I was honored to do so. I believe perhaps you have all received my letter. I don't know if I necessarily need to read it, although I will if it's required for the minutes or for the meeting materials. Is that something you'd like me to read, or? I'm seeing a head nod. Well, then I'll be very quick.
Okay.
My name is Jennifer Killian, and I serve as a community assistance forester with the Oregon Department of Forestry's Urban and Community Forestry Program. I am an ISA certified arborist, tree risk assessor qualified, and have recently completed my wildfire risk reduction qualification. Prior to my role at Oregon Department of Forestry, I was the urban forester for the City of Corvallis Parks and Recreation Department. During my 7 years with the program, I played a key role in drafting, publishing, codifying several sections of municipal code to better serve the urban forest and the community. Additionally, I am an instructor at Oregon State University, where I teach the urban forestry course with forest ecosystems and society, emphasizing the importance of developing strong and meaningful codes. Since joining the Urban and Community Forestry Program, I have assisted various cities with their code and ordinance needs, and I'm honored to extend this support to Cannon Beach. Over the past 2 months, I have met with members of the Community Tree Focus Group multiple times, dedicating considerable effort to reviewing the existing code, making suggestions, and helping to align this code with our industry standards of best management practices. Together, we have made substantive and procedural recommendations to align this ordinance with industry standards and best management practices. The focus group members were receptive to my suggestions, which have been incorporated into the current version of the ordinance. Establishing a robust tree ordinance with protective measures is essential for the community. In my professional assessment, the proposed tree ordinance aligns well with similar regulations in other jurisdictions throughout Oregon and offers the needed protections and safeguards to ensure a healthy and diverse urban tree canopy. The benefits of having a strong and robust urban tree canopy are significant and measurable, and are crucial to ensure that all residents have equitable and easy access to these ecosystem service benefits. Thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this important initiative. And I think I'm happy to take questions when that time comes.
I think if there's questions, we should ask them now.
Yeah, I think so.
Absolutely.
Have any questions for Ms. Killian?
I do have a question that I think she might be able to answer. I had a list of questions in here. I think there's only one that really applies to Jennifer's background. In the code that we have before us, in the standards section, there's a line indicating that root stumps and root structures are to be retained unless inside the planned building footprint. I was wondering about general best practices on that as requiring replanting, requiring that a stump is retained.
Yes.
A way of replanting, and what your thoughts were on that. I've never seen it. I couldn't find that in other codes. I just wanted to get your
Yes.
input on
Thank
that.
you. Thank you very much for that question. That's one I actually brought up to the group as a concern myself. And from my understanding, this is more for in riparian restoration work where those stumps are crucial to the bank stability. And removing them could cause a lot of bank erosion and being unstable. In a municipal setting, it would make much more sense to, if applicable, remove those stumps and replant.
Continuation of that question, if the stump is not removed, what height should the stump be retained at? Should it be at 12 inches, 24? Could we grind it down to grade?
Yes, I think, and excuse me, are you talking about stumps in the right of way or in a public setting like a park?
I'm talking more of under a house that has to be elevated.
Under a house that has to be elevated.
Yeah, to retain root structures.
I would say
Forested area.
in that situation, I think probably just flush to the ground is fine. You want to eliminate any sort of tripping hazard. So flush is fine to maintain that root structure.
And then in public right away?
Flush, unless you're replanting. If you're planning on replanting, I would say 18 inches below grade. And I'm happy to share a more specific spec for that. But typically you want to grind 18 inches below grade, remove all the grindings and backfill with an amended soil.
Jennifer, a question on that same line. You mentioned on riparian areas where there's a slope, there's always a desire to retain the stump and the root. What about a slide area or a steep area that has potential for sliding?
And that's where I communicated this to the group. That's a little bit outside of my expertise of municipal forestry. I'm unfortunately not very well versed in slides.
Would you think it would be the same as the considerations where you're on an embankment that's along a river?
I think it would be irresponsible for me to speculate on something that I'm not
All right. Thank you.
well trained in. Sorry.
No, that's fair enough.
So I would be curious to know when we use the word arborist versus an forester, for instance, what is the difference in training, and are we appropriately seeking input from an arborist? Is there a different kind of specialist?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking. So an arborist, let's see, what is it called? A forester can be an arborist can be a forester. Foresters tend to have a position like urban foresters where they're doing more managerial, long-term strategic management. Urban foresters typically manage a crew of arborists, even though like myself, I'm an arborist and a forester. Arborists, I don't want to make any specific generalizations, but arborists tend to do more of the crew work, the tree climbing, the removals, and more of that type of work. And again, that's not all the, that's not a rule, for example, but if you're looking at specific language or certifications, I would say having an ISA certified arborist, so International Society of Arboriculture certified arborists, and possibly one that is a tree risk assessor or is qualified in tree risk assessment.
Okay, great, thanks.
And a continuation of that, we do have a definition for our city arborist as an ISA licensed arborist with state of Oregon. Do you feel that we should also have that tree risk assessment assessor qualification included in that definition?
So can you please remind me what the definition would be used for? Would that be used for, let's say, hiring a city staff, or?
This would be in relationship to the arborist consultant that the city is using.
I see.
One, to review our plans and to do tree risk assessment.
I think, yes, I think so. I think that's an important qualification to have. And it's pretty common in our industry for people to have that.
Jennifer, are you suggesting that in every rural city across the state, or let's just say the coastal mountains, every small city should have a ISA certified arborist with the ability to do tree evaluation?
I was answering on behalf of, I think, what I understand for Cannon Beach.
Yes.
I was not making a comment for every rural community.
Right. So assume that we're a rural community and in a league with all those others. Would it be critical? Would it have an adverse impact to our program not to have that appraisal capability?
Would it have an adverse impact to not have a tree risk assessor? One of the nice things about being a tree risk assessor or even like a consulting arborist is you have a lot of extra tools. So in your toolkit, and you have a lot of resources. I would say if your community has the resources to get one, that is probably beneficial to you. I would say a lot of communities do have those.
Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted.
And I would just be curious, it sounds like you've looked at code across the state. How does this code stack up with some of the other cities that you've worked with?
It's very similar. A lot of the format's very similar and the content is very similar. Unfortunately, I can't give you specific names of cities, but I have seen cities that are far more lax and believe it or not, far more strict.
So for the ones that are more strict, what would that look like?
So specific penalties for tree removal, not up to and including a specific fine plus the assessed value of the tree, which could be tens and tens of thousands of dollars, depending on the size of the tree that was removed or vandalized.
What would you say to someone who says this proposed ordinance goes too far? Well, let me refresh.
Yeah.
Goes way too far.
Way too far. I would ask for specific examples. Specific sections or language that would go too far, and maybe I could help better in that way.
Well, Jennifer, one of the areas that has been has had a lot of discussion has been our notion that there's a certain kind of size of tree that deserves more protection, and we've kind of established a minimum DBH criteria. Is that whole concept? Do you see that in other places? We've had a lot of discussion on the specific numbers, but I'm more interested in, do other jurisdictions see the value of large trees and make additional protections?
Yes, I'm not prepared to come up with specific examples, although it's something I would be happy to do and then present to you or just give you in a report. I know, for example, the city of Portland, I don't know what the specific diameter is, and I know cities don't like being compared to Portland, but they have a quite strict code when it comes to the size of tree, even on private property. some communities base their protections off of areas within the city, like approximate to riparian corridors or significant oak habitats. So it's really city dependent.
Would the 24-inch DBH significant for conifer and 18-inch DBH for deciduous be consistent with communities similar to ourselves?
It'd be consistent. One of the things I brought up with the committee that I don't know if we ever resolved was the condition of the trees. So I would advocate that, and an arborist can help you with this because condition can be quite subjective. It really should be based on condition. A 24-inch tree in terrible condition shouldn't, there should be different considerations for a tree that's in very good condition.
So you're saying that would be a combined standard? It would be both the defects and condition would be the determination for significance? Or are you saying condition alone?
I'm saying size and condition.
Okay.
Yeah, in the same breath, it wouldn't make much sense to preserve a 1-inch tree that's in great condition, if, I don't know. When we're talking about ecosystem service benefits of trees, not that I'm advocating that you remove trees that are 1 inches, but if you think about the ecosystem service benefits of the trees, assuming the tree is in good condition or excellent condition, it's going to be much greater than a small canopy or smaller stature tree in that same condition. And really, that's what I think the goal in tree preservation is the ecosystem service benefits that the trees provide.
Jennifer, quick question. You mentioned that evaluating the health of a tree might be a little bit subjective, one
Yes.
tree to the next. Okay, thank you.
It is, and might I clarify also that our industry does have a standard on that. But what's a beautiful tree to me might not be a beautiful tree to you. And so there is a framework in condition rating, and it's a pamphlet or like a book in a series of our industry standards that talks about it.
Right. Thank you.
And that assessment can vary from arborist to arborist as well, correct?
Well, it's not supposed to, but I think it can sometimes.
Question for the guest, that's permissible?
It's generally not permissible. So maybe we could do public testimony. Wait, Jennifer, back after.
Yeah.
You're saying-
Yeah,
That was just a question for her, so that goes into a different.
I'm
it's just kind of the formalities of this process that,
Yeah,
we just.
so
need
we
to
can't
set
have-
them. So you will come up and speak and we'll bring her back on and allow you to raise your question.
I got you, okay.
Thank you.
That's fine.
Mhm.
Well, that wasn't made.
Jennifer?
I wasn't sure if it
No, that's
was
perfect.
open questions for Jennifer. or
Yeah,
just-
okay. Yes, thank you.
Um,
Jennifer?
I'm happy. I apologize. I should have asked the time requirements. I don't have much time left, but I'm happy to come back or leave a card, and I'd be happy to take questions after this.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Okay, so at this time, are there any other proponents who wish to testify? Are there presentations by opponents? Come on up, Tim.
Tim Ramey, PO Box 429, Cannon Beach. Kind of hate to be labeled as opponents because I'm appreciative that this has come a long way. Thinking to what Les said a minute ago, what you can and cannot do, I think you can do that. I'm not sure you should. Let me just touch on one kind of nitpick and then I'll wax philosophical for a second. We were on remarkably the same section, standards, number G, stumps and root structures shall be retained unless inside the planned building envelope. How do we feel about them being in the middle of the driveway? How do we feel about them being a foot away from a building where termites or other critters would chew them up. To me, this G makes zero sense at all, and I think Jennifer concurred. She said in a municipal setting, just grind the stumps. And I don't get it. Back to the kind of the waxing philosophical. I think you could do this. I really think it comes back to, though, this is a town that's a lot about views and a lot about seeing the ocean, a lot about seeing the mountains. And those of us who arrived here first cut the shit out of the trees that we wanted to cut down to see the views of the ocean or the mountains or whatever it is. And now you're telling people, well, you can't do that anymore. I'm all in favor of trees, but I think trees are very fungible. Trees are growable. They grow beautifully, and we do not have a problem with being bereft of trees in this town. And so my advice to you is to consider, is this a fight we really want to get into? You probably can. You probably could get away with it, but I'm just not sure it's advisable.
Are there presentations by opponents? No, right now.
Give somebody else an opportunity to do. Somebody else.
Remember, we're not gonna
I'm sorry.
maintain a conversation.
Andrew Tottery, PO Box 664. I have some questions more than comments, but there's something that my good friend Tim wrote in an email months ago, and I'm going to summarize it, but the quote was, he said something along the lines of, it takes a pretty jaundiced eye to look around Cannon Beach and see we have a lack of trees. And that phrase has been echoing in my head ever since. My question is, I was flipping through the packet today and I saw submissions by the Moons, and I'm somewhat familiar with the property that they own on the east side of the 101. Very wooded areas that are sadly zoned RVL. I think we should do away with RVL, but that's a debate for another time. I just wonder, with something, if this was to succeed, what would the cost of building a subdivision or of increasing our housing stock, and when we're in the midst of a housing crisis, how would this make that not only doable, but affordable? I don't know how putting houses up on pylons and hiring more experts and engineers to build these houses makes it accessible for anyone but the wealthy. And I would hope that the council or the committee will, has there been studies done on vacant lots, the wooded lots, to see what the actual, buildability and costs would come about if this were to be adopted? And I'm not a lawyer, I don't understand all this stuff, but when I look through it, it looks like it's just going to make costs rise. And I would love some discussion about that. And maybe I'm wrong, but it would be nice to better understand that.
Are there presentations by other opponents?
Go ahead and go. Craig Tula, Post Office Box 1073, Cannon Beach, Oregon. So I appreciate the time and effort of the committees and the people that have worked on this. I realize everybody's a volunteer putting a lot of time. I agree with Les's comments that it's a lot cleaner. It's a much better ordinance when I first read it. I feel as an opponent that I have been listened to, and some of the things that I have pointed out have been discussed. I will still say if this were to a vote, such as in the Coos, I would be a no vote. My main concern is I see this as exclusionary to probably the upper 10% of the income bracket. Now, one thing I'll divert briefly about the tree diameter size that Jennifer was talking about. The 18-inch, 24-inch, okay, I see that. In my mind, as I walk through and look at buildable lots, that's still a little too limiting. But I would say, and the question I had for her is maybe a standard where a tree, if it is diseased, regardless of its size, no longer becomes a significant tree. So that somebody doesn't have to pay the $4,000 to have it removed if it needs to be removed. So I would think that that was a question I was going to have for Jennifer, and that may be something I might ease it a little bit. I feel for somebody who does not have a lot of access or a lot of knowledge who wants to come to Cannon Beach, that the ordinance is a little bit intimidating. I've got to pay for an arborist. I've got to pay for the city arborist. It looks like, hey, I might just have to go consult an attorney for litigation. So that's kind of my concern with that to somebody who doesn't have the access to build that. But one thing that is a question that I have in my mind that with Cannon Beach that I still don't really see an answer to. I've listened to the candidates for city council, both at the coffee with the counselor and for the Cannon Beach Together brief. And I hear that housing is a problem, cost of housing, rents are too high. We can't attract workforce, we can't attract families. I see this as a limiting factor on supply. Demand is going to keep going up as I look at Cannon Beach. Go from Eugene, Oregon to Everett, Washington, you got about 7 million people, and this is a very unique area that I don't see anywhere else on the coast, having grown up and traveled the coast my entire life. So demand is going to be here. Interest rates go down with the Fed, more people are going to come here. So the question I have is, how do we balance in people's minds an ordinance which is going to raise the cost of housing? Whether it's significant depends on your income level. Vice and need for low income, not low income, but workforce, attracting families. That's the one thing I haven't really heard answered and would kind of be open to having addressed. But as far as the ordinance, I think there should be an exclusion for a significant tree if it's deemed diseased by an arborist. So thank you for listening to me.
Are there other presentations by opponents? Oh, please.
There's also a hand online.
Okay.
Yeah.
Walker, 4910 Southwest Richardson Drive, Portland, Oregon 975. I have a couple questions. One is the critical root zone. In my lifetime experience as an environmental consultant with different cities and codes, the canopy drip line was typically used as the roots within that tree zone, within that canopy drip line, straight down. And the tree root zone calculation, as you know, takes 1 inch and doubles it to feet. So like for a 22-inch hemlock, it would have 44-foot setback from the exterior of the trunk. And that's a huge setback. And it's going to make, in my opinion, a lot of the lots in Cannon Beach unbuildable, except for the cost of going through, which you've already heard. It's already cost so much money to take down a tree, just to pay for the arborist to take it down. The city's putting a surtax, that's not the right word, but putting an additional cost on the homeowner to deal with significant trees. And also in my experience, I think 18 and 24 is way too small. I would start looking like at 36-inch diameter. Those are nice big trees and they provide so much habitat and stuff, but I just think the smaller trees just aren't as significant as larger ones. And if you cut a deciduous tree and leave the stump, it's going to sprout and grow again. I had that experience with birch that we snagged on the property down here. And it wasn't until I girdled it with a piece of copper wire that it stopped sprouting. So it maybe leaving a stump if it's evergreen makes sense, but these are just questions I would have for, well.
Do we have any comments online?
We have one. Just a moment. Unidentified iPhone.
This is Jeff Moon from 220 Ogden Drive, Oregon City. And I got 3 property lots in Cannon Beach, along with family members in Cannon Beach. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of things that are still big obstacles with this whole proposal, but tree risk assessment was brought up by Jennifer. And that is a big thing. A lot of these trees that are coming into the city or are in the city now, at least on my property and so forth, have been nursery trees out of down logs, down old growth logs, or old growth stumps that these trees grew out of. Now I have 5 very large trees and I'm keeping all of them. And these trees are 50 inches in diameter to 74 inches in diameter. So these are big trees, okay? So you can see how much the rain drip would be. I mean, 70 some feet from my house. I'd have an issue with the tree roots and stuff. No, that shouldn't happen. There's too many statements that are not taken by the local arborists. I know local arborists have talked to Jan and other people on the committee. We have cumbersome process, and we're talking to allow people within 250 feet of comment and stuff about any tree that's going to come down on your property that you want to take down for any type of reason, and construction's one of them, or easements for water and sewer and stuff. 250 feet, there's no tree in town that's 250 feet, even if it was on my property edge, that would affect that person. Really, it's only, there's some stuff that you guys have in the laws that are for 250 feet around, some are 100 feet. I just think that's extreme. I think it should be adjacent property owners only. Don't need to get the town all riled up about a tree or whatever. There's just that's a key thing. The extreme measures to save a foundation or save the tree underneath the foundation, that's not good. I mean, my dad had an arborist come in 30 years ago to trim trees and top trees, okay, on their property. 30 years ago. Are those trees dead and dying? No, they're still alive. They're growing great. It's probably created a bigger canopy for them over the years, and nothing's wrong with them. They've lived and they keep living. So it's not unhealthy to top a tree. And I'm not going to be in a position down the road, years away, if it looks like it's a dying or hazardous tree, to go after and get a tree permit to get it cut down when it's 50 inches in diameter, or 60. And yeah, it's extreme. First of all, if I tried to do it illegally, which I'm not going to, but it's not tens of thousands, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars, people. One of my trees would be over $500,000. There's no reason. There's no tree out there, even white oak right now. You're only paying $7,000 per 1,000 board feet on this lumber. A spruce tree's not worth that much. And there should not be a penalty cost or basic cost based on that. It's just ridiculous. I just think there should be more of a public forum with this tree focus group. It's only 5 people, and maybe they reached out to this person in Oregon State, but there's other people in town. There's arborists, local arborists. Our trees do grow faster than the ones in Portland or in the Valley in Corvallis at Oregon State University. I went there, okay? The trees do grow faster, and a lot of our trees are hazardous trees that are again taken down or need to be taken down, and it shouldn't be such a thing. Just because it's over 24 inches doesn't mean it's safe. I have one that did grow out of an old growth tree. It has great root structure. It's safe. It's about 62 inches in diameter or so. But we have to have tree risk assessment and the condition of the tree. And if it's starting to die, we need to take it out. It cannot damage homes or sheds or decks or anything. And we can't save everything. These trees will die just like we all do. And things need to be looked at a little bit closer on this stuff. I mean, it just seems a little bit ridiculous. And like the guy said, if we're going to do a development for low income, I'll tell you one thing, my house is not going to be cheap up there. I can't build it cheap because of all the conditions, the excavation costs, and getting sewer and water up there, and power and natural gas. It's out of hand already. The costs are, and if you have to take all the trees out, that'd be a huge fine on any new properties that we could even build something like that on. So I wish people would think about that and really take it to heart, because it's pretty frustrating to hear this and stuff. And when you have a tree that you can't take down because it's a 20% slope, I think that's ridiculous. It should be 35% or higher. There's no 20% is not that much. and these roots are going to the water source, okay? And it's not even. Like if you look at a spruce tree, the root structure is not even. It's not 40 feet across or 40 feet in diameter all the way around. It's jagged. They're following the water line, so it's a lot of times it's with the slope. And if I'm right now, I'm paying for an arborist to take a look and make their decisions on it, and it costs me $600 to $800. I've done 2 tree removal reports in the last three years or so. You know, it was reasonable, but what's it going to cost? Is the fee from the city arborist going to be upfront in the price of the actual permit? So are we talking these permits for a tree removal permits going to be $500, $1,000, or $1,500 to pay for the arborist up front to look at it and see what our issue is? Right now we pay an arborist, and then the city comes and does it. We're already paying fees for city arborists, but it's not actually our arborist anyway. It's not a city employee, but they will get influenced by the city people, you know, the government people in the city. So I'm all for trees. I've worked in the wood industry for 30 plus years in all kinds of aspects of it. And I just think this is very detrimental to the city. People are already mowing their yards down, cutting them smaller trees down, and you're not going to want a tree going over 6 inches in diameter on your property. I guarantee you that. People will be cutting them down, and we're going to have windstorms that take trees down hundreds at a time, maybe 10 or 15. My brother had so many come down in the one storm in 2007.
Mr. Moon, we have about a minute left.
Okay. It's just kind of out of control, and any land that's coming into the city is all going to have to be cut with trees to build anything on there. So I respect everybody. I appreciate their time and stuff, but maybe there needs to be a tree focus group in an open forum so there's discussion back and forth, because we haven't had that at all in this whole 5-6 months journey just recently. So that would be appreciative also. All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. Do we have anyone else online?
Mr. Moon in the back.
On up. Thank you.
Steve Moon, P.O. Box 162, Cannon Beach, Oregon. You can obviously hear the frustration in my brother's voice. I understand what you guys are trying to accomplish here. And I want you guys to realize that trees are like people. Everyone has its own character, has its own canopy, root structure, everything. And you guys are coming up with all these rules, but really you need to look at it like every tree has its own story, has its own, like, you need to address that tree like a person. Really. The root structure, the canopy, placement on the property, what you can do with it, what you can't do with it, and throwing all these rules up like a big umbrella. It's like you can only look at one little spot. So I think you guys need to address that, because really you're gonna have to give more scope to the arborist that's going to be looking at the trees and the situations, instead of just so you have to do all this stuff and it's going to cost you all this money. It's not practical. When you build a house on a piece of property and it's wooded, you're probably going to have to cut most of those trees down, because you have your house, you have your utilities, you have your driveway, and that tree does not exist in that envelope. So realize that if you want to save all the trees, you better buy all the property up that's left in town, because if you're going to have people live here and build homes here, we're going to lose trees. We can replant trees, but not big, huge spruce trees. Think more like Portland with deciduous trees that don't blow over in the windstorms during the winter, because they're evergreens. And also think about me, you all know my situation, I'm in the woods, I'm in that zone of wildfire and city. So, and I have a house in the middle of that. How do I work with all those trees and make it safe for my home? And being in a urban wildfire area, you know? So anyhow, and make it cheaper for the permits, because I don't have a lot of money. I said it before, you know, it should be a streamlined process, because I can't come back every year for a permit to trim 10 trees or cut one tree down to give more growth to another tree. So, yeah.
Thank you, Mr.
Well,
Mayor.
Bring it on anymore, but just consider that. I appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Anyone else with comments as an opponent? Do we have a staff response?
No, I think some of the questions in terms of the stumps, are good because I guess from our perspective, when do we know to go 18 inches underground? When do we know to keep it X amount of height? I think some people have brought some valid points up in terms of housing and the comparisons of the trees. So, yeah, that would be it.
Thank you. Does the applicant or the proponents wish to make additional statements?
I don't care to, Mike.
Oh, it would be great to be able to answer all the questions or some of them. I tried to write them up. If you don't object.
Why don't we, as we, if you have that, we can have that
Yeah, okay,
conversation
good,
maybe during
good,
deliberations.
Good.
Okay. All right, so at this time, I'm going to close the public hearing and we will move to consideration. I'd like to start.
I have a funny feeling I'm probably gonna have the most comments on this.
Sure.
Can I answer the question so far, Jay? And then it probably will segue into some of your own.
Section by section, so.
I wouldn't mind letting Jay speak because he
He's
has
gonna go section
an
by
opportunity.
Section by section.
Okay, all right.
You can hit them up as we get to that section.
Yeah.
If I can cross section them, I just want to make sure that we get all those questions out there.
I didn't say anything that was-
No, you won't.
To start, this is a vast improvement to the first one that we got. So I recognize all the work that's gone into it. I understand that a lot of people may feel that I'm an opponent to this, but I am not opponent to revisions to the code. I just want to make sure that's written correctly and takes into consideration all of our citizens equally, and all the zones equally. So to start, I'm going to start right at the definitions. I see that at-risk tree has been removed. I think that needs to stay in there because there is a difference between an at-risk tree and a hazard tree. I think that section should be added back in there. And I believe Jennifer made a comment about that in her report as well. Moving on to the critical root zone. I think this is very much overdone, and I have to agree with Mirth Walker. Oversized. Typically, a CRZ is a canopy diameter. You are almost doubling that. When we see trees falling over Toothpick Hill, they're not 40-inch trees do not have, or a 20-inch tree does not have a 40-inch root lift on it. It's roughly
40 foot.
40 foot.
Yeah.
Root lift is typically the canopy that we see that leaning over. I think this needs to be addressed. Your RPZ is half the CRC, which I think is more realistic to actually be a CRC.
So, no, just as we have questions,
Yeah. Stop now.
did you have this conversation with Jennifer about the CRZ and her sense of how this was defined in the code? I think she's gone. So I'm just asking as a committee, did you discuss with her?
The discussions happened between Lisa and can we bring Lisa up as a member of the?
No, this
Okay,
is
go ahead.
deliberations. The record is closed.
Yeah, we have it and we've had more discussions within the group as well without, before we brought Ms. Killian in. You know, that is I mean, it's a very widely known rule of thumb. The drip line edge is the critical root zone. But we really felt like that we needed to stick with the ANSI standards. And they're very clearly defined and they do not define it that way.
So this is the ANSI standard?
Yes.
You have a section that.
You know, drip line is a rule of thumb and it's used widely. I'd heard it years ago, but that is, you know, that isn't the best way to define it. What I think you need to do though is look into, you know, so what are we requiring once you've identified this critical root zone? And we're not, you know, we define this root protection zone, which is you know, half the diameter of the critical root zone. And we start talking about how to protect those critical structural roots that exist within that.
Okay.
And I heard a lot about, you know, from Moons in particular about, you know, trees are unique. And if we could understand that individual root structure, there are ways that you can build close to a tree that is not going to damage that tree. And that's really what we're trying to get to is that conversation happens rather than, oh, there's a tree there, we just need to cut it down, or we get too close to the tree and we ruin 2 or 3 of the structural roots and we kill the tree. It just doesn't die immediately. So.
But to respond to Jay's question, it is the root protection zone that is probably the operative concept as you go to construction, and that is the zone that you feel is reasonable. You may not feel it's reasonable, but that is half the standard.
Correct.
In fact, that's what Oregon State University recommends in there.
Sure.
So.
Well, I had a question regarding that. The materials that are referenced in here, they that are referenced, the three links that have been provided. All 3 of them say that both the calculation of DBH or the drip line can be used to determine.
The problem we have with the drip line is we have to be clear and objective for these construction things. And using drip line just doesn't give us the ability to enforce anything under this code. So what we tried to do is comply with state law and bring this in to I think it was what you had recommended before, 1/2 a foot per an inch.
I never recommended that.
I thought you said that was the local standard.
Critical.
You said it was the local standard last time we were here.
Easy.
Yeah.
But why are we putting this very heavy condition in this code rather than allowing an arborist to determine what the CPZ is and the RPZ?
We also have a clear and objective standard issue, which is if code is related to housing, Oregon State requires that all of the standards be clear and objective and like down to the number. So as one of the commenters said, it would be wonderful if we could have an open code that said, go and individually assess the tree, figure it out, talk to the arborist. Wouldn't that be nice? But it's not enforceable. So I think that we always have to remember that we're trying to fit numbers and something that's objective. But then if we have an objective standard, it is okay under the law to have an alternative pathway that is not objective, so to speak, but we have to set at least a standard that is clear and objective. And so that might answer some of the question about why this is feeling so heavy, because we have to have that objective standard. But then maybe it looks like here in the root protective zone, the city arborist could determine an alternative or asymmetric pattern.
And shouldn't we put that also in the CRZ?
So that's the question for you. Should that be in the CRZ or does it not need to because is it not operative in the rest of the code?
So CRZ based on this or.
Those kind of changes, Jay, I don't object to. I really.
Yeah, I would have to agree, Mike. I don't think that there's any reason why we could not, reasonably think that way. However, we don't recall anything out as best I can recall based on the CRZ of any particular tree. It's the basis for understanding
RPZ.
I think with that, we need to have that option.
I'm happy to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But Mickey's also right. And a lot of the things, because we have to set down objective standards, there is the variance process. And if somebody were come in and say, this is just not reasonable for my situation, then, we can consider that. And there are all those standards for a variance that somebody would have to go through, but. Okay.
It's also another.
I know.
Right.
Okay, we can move on. The city, unless anyone else. The city arborist, I think we need to put in there the ISA licensed arborist and tree risk assessment credential.
You know what, again,
Jennifer.
let's put it in.
Okay.
We'll go push Jeff to get his certification.
That's fine. Hazard tree should also have.
How are we gonna keep changing? How are we gonna keep not changing?
You have a certificate.
It says as determined by an ISA.
Oh, right,
certified
that's the
arborist
risk assessment.
who has the qualification of the tree risk assessment.
Yeah, in our present case, Jeff, is certified to do that. And he
Last time I talked to Jeff, he did not have.
Yeah, I'm not-
Hazard
I'm
certificate.
not sure he does. He is a certified arborist.
He's a certified arborist.
And if
You
you,
don't believe that he's,
No, he does not
Tree
have an
risk
ISA
assessment.
tree assessment, risk hazard. That's
I'm
qualified.
imagining get online and take that.
About $600.
Yeah, well.
Pay for it, you can get it within a week.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Next one is significant tree. I have to agree with a lot of our opponents here that the 24 and the 18 is a very narrow scope. And that should be considered or taken in consideration.
We've gone back and forth on that, Jay.
Again?
Let me tell you, I just want to explain to you how we got to that again, because Mr. Tulip has asked that question multiple times. And what we've gone back, it was actually Jennifer's boss was the first one we asked. And he said, 24 inches is a good number for a tree in your environment. And, if it's 23 or 25, yeah, there's a certain amount of arbitrariness to it between those, but it's not unusual. Now, if you go to Portland, it's 20 inches.
Yeah, I'm familiar with narrow in Portland, but that's.
Yeah, you go to other cities and it's much smaller.
That's a much denser environment with less trees than ours.
Yeah,
So-
go to Sisters.
I feel that it should be taken into consideration that maybe we should look at that a little.
Yeah.
And on that same one, I had a question about viable. It doesn't define in here viable, and that relates further down in my mind to.
Let's just put in the disease tree. We'll have to figure it out.
Okay.
Size and condition.
No, I'm gonna say if it's a disease tree, it comes out, right?
yeah, actually, that's kind of what we.
Well, we meant, but it just didn't come across.
Okay.
There's a definition of viable.
How did I miss it?
Yeah, viable tree means capable of surviving.
Look at that. Yeah.
Moving on to the tree removal permit, section B, note 1. Each tree proposed to be removed shall be marked. Jennifer noted this. How is it to be marked? I think we need to go either by tape or paint or something. It's clearly identified.
We did that and we were told that it was kind of gonna be inconvenient for public works and
She has
community
that.
development. Huh?
She has this comment in her.
Jennifer does, but
Page 6.
Jay, we talked to the people who for that.
Well, that would be the arborist who's gonna.
No, it's gonna be our staff. And really what they preferred is we not mark it, except for there is a tiny dot, but they would like the flexibility here to do what they want.
Why, for a person who's applying for a tree removal permit, why would the city be responsible to mark the trees?
Well, maybe you tell people how to mark them. I don't know, but.
No. Oh.
But there's either there's the sign, which hasn't worked. There's the wrap around the tree.
Defining how it is.
Yeah, but there's also the orange dot and they're trying to figure out the right way to do it. So if you want to put it in, hey, you can do an orange dot, you can do a yellow ribbon.
And this is the arborist's responsibility, who's contracted to the owner that marks the trees to be removed. And I think we need to define that so they clearly understand what it is.
What do you use? You use orange paint, right?
Where are we at section?
17-114-040 tree removal permit, section B, note 1,
Page 5.
page 5.
It might be a different page if you're looking at some of the comments. I'm looking for without comment.
The paper one.
If you open your handout, it would be bottom of page 6.
Thank you.
I know Public Works had concerns about
Yeah,
the
and
marking of it in the right of way.
I think, I mean philosophically, at least for me, what we really wanted to do, and a lot of this was trying to make the development pre-codes match what the city does with our right of way and public property trees.
Okay, we'll just put it in there.
And
That's an orange dot.
we did. I mean,
And then
we
they have
started
the
with
concern.
signs and flags and all sorts of cool stuff. And we were told exactly what happens to all of that stuff. And we came to a kind of a negotiated agreement with that. The best thing was this dot of paint. And we could put that in, I think.
Yeah, that's-
But
If it's defined.
Yeah.
Tell the people who aren't us.
Dot of paint, with the orange dot of paint.
Or however.
I think that's useful too, because someone reading the code would then know what to look for.
Yeah.
With paint applied directly to the trunk or something.
But you know,
And
it's
that was-
helpful for everyone to know.
That was our intention, to make it very clear to everybody which trees they're getting cut, and we kept getting scaled back, so. Anyway, orange dot's fine.
Okay.
Moving on, section 2, 200 feet of property notification. Who's responsible for that? We don't say who's responsible for making those notifications. And is that 250 feet actually realistic? I have to do proximity is everything. Over proximity is a lot, 200.
It's the standard the city uses for all notifications of it. So,
I believe city makes that
Yeah.
notification.
As long as it's been notated, but I think maybe we want to put that, and again, Jennifer noted this in her comments on page 6, who makes the notification. Moving on to section D, the pre-development conference. It notes the cost of the city arborist to be included in the permit fee borne by the owner.
Oh, actually, I apologize.
Oh, please.
Oh, no, if we want to do that one, I did want to go back to that last one.
Let's go back to the one that you have, because I'm, like I said, let's go in order.
Yeah. Oh, shoot. Minimize my entire screen. So on that, in the appeal, section, notice of removal, as well as right to appeal, does this apply to the disease trees and then a posthumous application for removal of a dead tree? Does this appeal process apply in those cases? Is it because you have to get the permit after the tree?
Right.
It would be silly to appeal somebody removing a dead tree when they apply for the permit afterwards to have that permit denied, but is this?
I'm not sure.
In regards to the dead tree, there is a section.
That you don't have.
Removal of dead tree, which is found by the city arborist to be dead. Application for the removal of dead tree does not require ISA tree hazard evaluation.
It doesn't require the evaluation, but is it still subject because you're still
Notification.
to the notification and the appeal process?
Yeah.
And same with the diseased tree that is not a viable tree.
Yeah, you would want to have the same notice and appeal because somebody might not agree, right? So why would you take that right from them? That's really what we're trying to do with notice and appeals here is given the fact that our enforcement resources are so low in this city, we're trying to make it possible for citizens to help with enforcement where they feel like a tree is coming down improperly. So that is what we tried to do here.
I think your point, though, if in the case of a hazardous tree that is deemed needs to be taken out immediately, that's where you get into the after the fact permit application. And I do think in that case, it would probably be a little silly to.
You do have a language, I read in regards to that too.
Yeah, we do address.
Yeah, I think.
Aaron?
No, that's all I had there.
Again, the pre-development conference, this is
where are you?
This is D, page 6 and 9.
Okay.
This is a great idea. I've been doing this myself outside of the city to meet with the arborists. But I think we might have to put in some, it just says permit, the cost is to be included in the permit fee to be borne by owner, but we don't identify what that cost is. Is it hourly rate? Is it, people should know how much it's going to cost to do that.
Yeah, we have, there'll be a fee schedule and that it'll just be embedded in that. So whatever you pay to cut the tree,
Is that part of?
yeah, you're paying for the arborist.
So is that the tree fund or is that?
No, that's just getting the tree permit. With the tree fund, we get something like, you didn't want to replace the tree, so you pay $1,000 or, that's.
So that's part of that already predetermined.
Yeah.
Okay, should we,
And a lot of people, by the way, and we haven't tried to address it, Jay, have said it should go up. There are others that said it should go down. I mean, that's a policy question that needs to come up. I agree.
that one I'm not.
Okay.
But we should also, I think, in the section, say when this happens and how is it arranged?
Which, I'm sorry, that,
Section pre-development conference, when does it happen?
I believe, can I ask a question? I believe there is a normal process in your evaluation of a proposal, is there not, or is it a?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would just be like generally what we do when we're talking development wise. It'd be similar to, the pre-development meetings sometimes we have with you. But I think it indicates prior to issuance of any tree removal permit, so I guess it's saying the pre-development conference needs to happen prior to a permit being issued.
Well, the way we do tree removal permits is that they are actually last in line in the permitting process, correct?
As far as house development?
And review.
Yeah.
As
So,
far as when they get issued, yes.
Yeah.
They can all come in at the same time. They all generally get reviewed broadly around the same time. But in terms of an order of issuance, yes, they are the last in line.
so what about having a it's a pre-design, pre-development conference that is before application of tree permit?
Yeah, you know what? We actually had that discussion and, a lot of people wanted to do that.
Yeah.
In fact, I can recall one person, but it's like, how much before?
Before,
Is it?
before a designer, architect.
Yeah, before, okay, so you get a tree permit in before the
Not talking tree permit.
application before you.
No, we're just talking about the pre-development conference part.
No, well, you want it before you want the pre-development conference happening before the.
Or someone.
Before you even-
considers
Yeah.
drawing something.
Why you have a gleam in your eye? Yeah, so.
Clients
is
say
it-
they want to build a house.
Is it 15 minutes? Is it 30 minutes? Is it 2 weeks? Is it a month? We really struggle with that. And then we just said, there's a process. Let's use the process.
Yeah, but that process is last in line.
Well, hey, it was the recommendation they said for pre-development, have somebody come in. Pre-development, before you come in and decide when you put your design down on the table, where we get the development permit. You know what I mean? And all those trees are laid out. We see it all the time.
But these people are going to be paying for that development prior to even knowing if they can take a tree out. Or under a recommendation by the city's arborist to or not to.
Actually, we don't stop any trees from coming out here, not one. So I don't know how you're figuring that. There isn't anything that stops a tree from coming out in this.
There are, for significant trees.
There are processes you gotta go
that
through.
You have to jump. All I'm asking for is to have the ability, or someone to have the ability to talk to the arborist before even considering what a project does.
I recommend you tell all your clients that.
Well, should.
This code wouldn't stop them from doing that, right?
Yeah.
Because it just says prior to issuance of the permit, so it could be the very first step, it could be the second or third.
I'm jumping off comments from page 5 of Jennifer.
Okay.
As well, so I think that one has.
And I think they're good comment, a good discussion, but the purpose of this document had to do with trees. And so all we're really saying is that before the tree permit gets issued, we want there to have been a pre-development discussion. You may be very right that it really ought to be even sooner than that, but that isn't going to go in this document, as far as I can tell.
All right. Moving on to 17, 11450 permit issuance. your numbering system's off. I'm sure you'll correct this as you go.
Oh, I see 1, 3, 4. Yeah, sorry about that.
Already?
Now, we've been talking about hazardous trees. Are hazardous trees considered to be, have a fee for their removal or to be added to the fund?
It's a good question, Jay. I don't think we've considered that, so let us consider it.
Moving down to significant trees, we've talked about. Section A. Consideration moving to the. That's reasonable as long as we don't run into problems with the CRCP or CRZ. Now, this section only applies to significant trees that are stated for size. How have you guys addressed removal of trees that are less than 24 inches or 18 inches? Is that under review by the city's arborist? Can the city's arborist prevent a project from going for trees that are less than significant?
The process would be the same as it is now. If you're gonna remove a tree, you get a permit and it's cut. The only thing that would be different here is you'd have to replant.
So the arborist.
We haven't asked the arborist to come in and jump in.
Less than 24 inches or 18 inches, the arborist really just says, okay, if it's in the building footprint or whatever, we can take it out and you just pay into.
We haven't walked you through any process here. It's just the same old.
Is that listed anywhere in?
It doesn't, you want me to say, well, yeah, we can put that in.
I think we should have some language for trees that are not significant.
We can put it in.
Just
The way this usually works is you only put in what you're trying to influence, but we can put.
we got to take consideration.
Yeah, we can put that in.
Moving along to, sorry, I'm trying to go through this as quick as possible, staying in that removable tree. In the original one, we had removal trees for both health, vigor, and surrounding. Trees required to provide solar access. That whole section has been.
Yeah.
We're finding that a lot of people are going to want to put solar panels and stuff. What is the idea and backing on why removal of trees for solar access, considering?
Is Bill here?
Yes.
Do you mind if I?
Considering that
It happened after we published and Bill came back and said, your language is not clear and objective. And so what we said was, it's out of the old code. So
back in there.
I don't know. That's why I want to ask Bill. Bill, what were you recommending with that?
And so, if you can just, I lost track of exactly where we are. So where are we on this?
We're in the section for removal of trees, but the removal of the sections speaking about solar access for solar energy systems.
This is page.
This is
7.
it was in the original page 9.
Oh, 9.
And then it is left out of the revised page 8.
Revised page 8, okay.
Because we had F section, we stop at section E in the revised where F was solar access for solar energy systems.
Pull it up. And that is not where it's supposed to be, so let me find it here. I apologize for this.
We're losing.
That's okay. He's on the side. He's just finding it.
Need a section number?
Yeah, I have to open up this one.
With the-
Section number
Trying to do.
17-114-050, subsection E, and actually just subsection F has been removed.
Yeah, so what the code section said is removal of a tree where required to provide solar access to a solar energy system where pruning will not provide sufficient solar access to permit effective operation of the solar energy system. Both the terms sufficient as well as effective are pretty classic, not clear and objective standards, how do
Bill,
you-
can I ask a question on that?
Let's let Bill finish.
That's out of it's out of the old code, right? I mean, that's kind of what we did and it's been in there for a while.
Yep.
I mean, part of this is looking at who is potentially going to object over something like that. I'm wondering what the risk is of just leaving that in. We didn't have a chance to ask you this,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
no, we haven't. The risk is, so we've got, this is in the removal tree. The city, if the person can demonstrate this. So somebody comes in and says, I'd like to remove this tree because it is, meets this criterion, and we say, well, no, we disagree. And their response would be, well, this isn't clear and objective, and so I get to remove it regardless because this can't be enforced because it's not clear and objective. It requires, I could say, this doesn't provide me with effective operation of my solar system. And you say, and you get a solar tech in there saying, actually, this small amount of shading really, it's not going to impact your solar and it's going to be perfectly effective. And that's the heart of the dispute of, what's clear and objective and what isn't.
Yeah, I get it.
So would that fall into a variance situation or something?
I don't want to suggest that, but I was thinking when we took it out, that if somebody came and said, hey, I want to put a solar panel up, nobody in their right mind would say you can't cut a tree to save, to use solar. So, but I don't want to put it in that. I just, I think
You're trying to streamline, but.
I was trying to get done with in a situation where we couldn't ask the question. I guess we're gonna have to talk about this.
All I want is conversation.
So, yeah, let's have that be something.
No, we're gonna have to.
That's, I think, not with us, but with
Yeah.
Friends of Trees, that's fine. I just want, something to have to be consideration.
Yeah.
Because this is something that's going to be requested more often.
Yeah, there's something we need to talk about.
So that's fine. Moving on, page 9, 16, we're jumping from A to C. Again, notation. Section G, I talked about the stumps, so I think that is really.
Stumps, we'll take it out.
You'll address that, sure. I'm almost done. I apologize. We have other things that we have to address. 17.114.100 tree replacement policy. This is considerably better. I still think the fines for are still a little high. I feel that we should put a cap in place so that someone who owns the RLV zone, such as the Moons, are not financially put under stress. I think this is going to carry over to other projects and saying that, okay, for every significant tree, you got 4,000 plus 1,000 that says, in fees addition to any fee paid, the tree cannot be replaced, so that's another $1,000. But this is going to affect projects that we're looking at that are potentially coming up, such as the redesign of the RV park.
Jay, for that, we're gonna forgive those fees.
You're gonna forgive those fees
For
for a
affordable,
city project.
for affordable housing.
Okay, so let's move on to the campsite that we talked about last week, or last session. These people are already going to be paying the SDC, the developments for the connections. They have a parking lot in there. Let's say that takes out, 20 trees, 16 trees. That's an additional 16,000 for non-significant. Another 64,000. Again, should we put a cap in place to not prevent development?
Jay, believe me, we have agonized over this.
I'm sure you have.
And, I've actually talked to a lot of people about it. I've gone out and met with people who are building and trying to understand how this would affect them. And they say the same things. It's, geez, we're not one of those wealthy people who can afford all this. And why don't you write it so it doesn't affect me so much? Which is, my situation is I'm not wealthy. The problem is I have to write this law for everybody. And we have a lot of people who are more than willing to disregard every one of these provisions, including pay the amount that, you know, God forbid somebody would pay if they cut a tree illegally. And that's how we need to write law. And so what we try to do is put that amount for the small trees. You know, our preference would be people plan. You know, if they want us to do it, it might cost you a little bit more, but $1,000 is a very good amount of money for that. You know, if you think about long-term maintenance and stuff like that. On the other street, we just want to have some teeth in the fact that we're asking people to stop just cutting trees down without thinking about it, but go through a process and actually put some teeth in it. Because at the end of the day, we're not stopping anybody from cutting any trees or from building any homes.
May not be doing it written in this code, but you looking at a financial development tax for putting into a tree fund is a restriction put on people that may not be able to afford it.
I understand.
That's
And
going to make sites undeveloped.
I understand that. And what we've tried to do is pick up those ones, the housing we want and needed housing, I'm defining broadly. Those get exempted from those fees.
So when these are in place and that
You'll hear it
campsite,
tonight.
that campground comes in and say that we have to remove 30 trees, we're gonna tell them that they have to pay.
I don't know what we tell them. Honestly, I don't know what their situation is. They didn't give us any information. So to speculate about what they're gonna have to take down is kind of silly.
Not really, because it needs to be taken into consideration, because it's something that's going to be coming up and something that is not just going to be for them.
Something that's gonna come up and we're gonna have a new tree code. And the tree code is you replace or you pay us to replace. And you think about these big trees and God forbid you have to cut any of them. It'll cost you a little bit.
Trees, it's little tree. And I think, you know, this is, I don't, Moon should not be responsible for a tree fund for the city's use excessive, without a cap on it. It's excessive. It's going, they
What do you recommend, MJ?
put a cap on it.
What? Tell me what you recommend. Tell me what you're thinking.
15,000.
15,000.
That's 15 trees.
Cap. Okay. All right. So interesting idea. I'm glad we get to do this in front of everybody, by the way.
Well, this is, I'm glad I have more than 3 minutes.
Yeah. So we have other developments in this city. We have one, and I'm not demonizing anybody that came in and cut 97 of those trees. And they were doing it to build premium homes. And I think it's very reasonable in that situation for us to get that full 97,000 if they don't want to pay the replant those.
It's just a development tax. That's all.
Well, it is. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Be careful with
It's
trees.
not a fund, it's a tax.
No, it's a tree fund that allows us to replace those trees.
I don't have a problem with you putting a number to it. That's fine. I think that we need to control that number somewhere or another. And that's my only opposition.
So you want it on the little trees and the replacement, or you want it on the 4,000 and?
Yeah, then let's put a number to this. Let's say, okay, not to exceed.
I'm not gonna go to not to exceed, but I will. What do you think?
Sounds like you've got a point of conversation to have.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we might be able to try to resolve it here.
I'm not looking to hash it out today.
No, I want to get this done if we can.
But I think that nothing's going to be passed tonight. It's clear there's a lot of work left. So this might be a really fruitful conversation for you to have and bring back with some proposals and explanation.
All I'm asking.
But
Okay.
what that might look.
And Jay, I'd like to talk to you separately.
That's fine. I'd be happy to have, I would be happy to have a conversation with the citizens.
Yeah.
And we can do this without.
Your last comments. Let's get your last one.
Last one is just a simple notation on section C.
What was it?
Some extra numbers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just think in your last minute rearranging.
And was it? Was it intended to leave out, was it intended to leave out the applicable locations for replacement trees on site shall be based on estimate? Sure. And that the applicant's proposed location replacement trees shall be subject to approval by the community development director and the city arborist as part of the tree plan. Those two things seem reasonable in there.
Okay. All right.
I'm done.
Is there anybody else who wants that? Eric.
So I think just as a general, oh, go ahead, Mary, you go first.
I just wanted to say he essentially hit most of mine that I didn't already interject into. The only one that I had a question about, I think we also already covered. With the getting significant trees, including a health assessment with them as part of it. And I was just,
Disease, yeah, we'll put it.
that's just making sure that that's included in the rating of whether or not a tree is significant or not, if it is the condition of the tree.
In regards to being a hazard.
It being a hazard, I was just thinking personally in my backyard, I have a tree, a red alder that would be considered significant. I think it's like a 42-inch. It's gigantic,
Yeah,
but it's mature.
Yeah.
In my lifetime, it will die.
yeah.
And I'm concerned about having to additionally pay in 4,000 once it gets to that point. Not where, before it's dead is probably when we'll end up having to cut it, so it doesn't become a hazard, but paying that $4,000 on top of a specialized arborist to come out and remove that tree to avoid the buildings and all of these additional fees of a tree that I don't want to remove in the first place.
So help me understand specifically what you'd like to change. And then we'll take it.
But it's the disease portion. I think because that would essentially cover that for, because in this example,
Okay,
it's not a tree that I'm intending on removing for development. It's a tree that's being removed because it needs to be removed
Okay.
for the health of me to not get run over by this tree. And I don't want to take that risk of having to keep it longer than I need to because I don't have an additional $4,000 to pay into the fund because it's considered a significant tree.
And is it the $4,000? Is that the piece that catches your eye primarily?
That's the part that affects me. That's in terms of that, it being considered significant and then having to pay that $4,000 on top of tens of thousands of dollars that it's going to cost to have the tree removed in the first place by.
So should you have to pay into the tree fund for something that's deemed a hazard?
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. Okay,
Certainly one of the tension points, we recognize big trees because we love big trees, but big trees are old trees.
Sure.
And, closer to the end. And how do you deal with that in a fair, clear, objective way? We struggle with that. I get it.
I think the TFT method is perfectly appropriate for people who are doing this without.
yeah,
We have to have rules for that, and that is a good determinant
yeah.
and perfectly applicable. I think the tree fund, I know why you want to do it. We want to get more trees planted in the city. We want to deter from
Mhm.
cutting down trees. But I think we need to look at the fees a little closer.
Okay, that's fair enough. We have some more work to do. I accept that.
One more unrelated to directly
Yeah.
trees, but more broadly as this code. We heard a number of comments tonight about the restrictions on development that this places. Is there a plan with
It'll come up.
the group to look directly at that? Is how this is going to impact the building on
Well,
Cannon Beach and the economic impact that's going to have on.
we are looking at the impact on the other kind of development will go on regardless, and if it costs within the numbers that we come up with, it costs a little bit more money. It's unfortunate, but that's where we're losing all of our trees. So what we try to do is just pull out the needed housing and say, for these, we understand that paying this to get affordable housing is kind of contradictory. And I'm again defining affordable housing broadly, but if it's a house on the forest that's, using up all the floor area ratio and, putting in all the, the nice things, then they're gonna have to pay for it. And the fine we have to calibrate, and we try to, and we're gonna go back, or not the fine, but the amount. And we're gonna go back and look at that. That's just what we started with. We understood that, those big homes, we might slow them down a little bit. I doubt it. But, yeah, answer your question is we're not making exceptions for those, just for the affordable housing.
Okay.
And this was just a similar comment, you know, when we were talking wetlands and stuff like that, you know, all the lots that are left are wetlands and tree filled and things like that. So, you know, there's not many that are just blank, easy developable parcels. So this will, I would say, impact, you know, anybody who's coming in at this point in time.
Unless they're building what we need.
That's correct.
Can I answer the questions, a few of them that came in, or would you like to move on to
Sure.
something else? I mean, there were so many out there and I feel like we never
I
get.
feel like we,
to-
so maybe just the ones that you don't think were hit on, because Jay probably covered many of the questions that were raised.
Yeah, the DBH thing and the condition, I think that was Mr. Ramey and also Jennifer. The problem with that is going to be objective. We're going to have to really work that, but yeah, we agree with that point. The stumps, yes, mea culpa, that was me. So, yeah, okay, we can take this. Okay. Trees fungible. I think we heard Jennifer say, yeah, some of them, they are fungible, but when they get into, the level where they're becoming huge carbon sequestration sinks, they're not fungible. And that's why we're doing this. Housing crisis stock, Andrew, yeah, and Mr. Tulip. I hear that. Again, we are trying, and if you stay, is Marcy still here? Yeah, if you stay, you'll hear a little bit about how we make adjustments for the types of homes we want.
Don't stay, I'll catch you.
Okay, or you, yeah, okay. Let's see. Root zone, Jay, I think you kind of realized that root zone, critical root zone, and we were going with RPT and we were just using CRT to help us define it, but we are trying to cut that back as far as we can, and we have gone well below standards on that.
As long as we add that note for
Yeah.
harbors.
Mr. Moon. I have struggled forever to figure out what that situation was that you're dealing with, and I understand it now. I was looking at it and trying to think how you might deal with that coming in, and I started looking at our code and, your residential very low density, I believe. There's a forest management provision in our code for residential very low density that defines very clearly what you can do with a forest. I recommend you take a look, and if it doesn't answer your question, let's talk about it, okay? I struggle with that. I could not for the life of me figure out how we would do it, but fortunately, somebody's thought of it. So, give me a call if you don't like it, okay?
Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
So if I understand, there is still,
Yeah, we have work to do. I didn't want to be in that position, but,
Can I make one more
Yeah.
suggestion? In the definitions,
yeah,
there's an inconsistency of when it's an abbreviation and when it's the full written out
okay.
word.
for which word?
Um,
ISA?
no, in the actual, let me go back to it again. I think it's only one that's funky. Let me find it. It was DBH, is inconsistent with the rest of them. The rest of them have the word critical root zone and then parentheses, the abbreviation. DBH starts off with the abbreviation and then goes to the word. Is that weird nitpicky?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we got it.
That's a.
Thank you. Eric.
Okay,
that's
so
possible.
All right, we can check that one off.
that's right. Isn't that nice? So it sounds like this will need to be continued. How long does the continuation process?
There's a couple of substantive issues we need to talk about, so I'd say a week or two, and if we could, I don't want to push any meetings that nobody wants to take, but I would like to get this before the commission sometime before the last,
The December.
the last, council
Robert,
meeting.
what is the date of the December meeting?
For planning commission, 16th or the 17th.
Monday, the 16th.
All right.
So what do you think on timing? I mean, that's only 3 weeks. I guess that's probably what we should shoot for.
Can
Yes.
be done in that time? I
Yes.
think the question is,
I think we've dotted all the i's and crossed all the t's, and I love the comments we got.
So you'll come back December 16th. So this time around, we still have basically a draft. There are still little comment bubbles, et cetera.
Yeah, and
Are we
footnotes.
looking at coming back December 16th with a complete final could be approved version?
November.
16 November. You said
Oh, you
December.
want to do November? I thought we were talking December.
November.
I thought you said.
Oh, I thought we talked November or December. If we,
I think,
Yeah, I
what is
think
our?
You said that,
November
wait,
meeting?
we thought you said the last of the year.
I want to hit council for their last meeting.
Oh, okay.
November is we wanted to talk about this anyways, because we changed it. I think, what was that? 26th?
Yeah, I think it's Tuesday, the 26th.
So,
Yeah.
Okay, so you want to continue this until November 26th meeting?
Mhm.
And at that point, we would have a final copy that's cleaned up.
Right. All the footnotes out, everything.
Right.
Before.
Yeah, please, let's do it. I'm sorry that
So I think we'll need a motion to continue. Does anyone wish to make a motion?
I move that we continue this discussion until November 26th.
Do we have a second? I hear a second. Do we have any discussion? Tessa, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Bates,
Yes.
Commissioner Matusek,
Yes.
Commissioner Orloff,
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair,
Yes.
Commissioner Ostrander,
Yes.
Vice Chair Moritz.
Yes. Motion passes. This is continued until the November 26th meeting.
that's one real quick question. Hey, Tessa, 26 is correct, right? Tuesday, the 26th? Okay, all right. Thank you.
It's good to check.
All right.
All right, moving on to our next agenda item. This is a legislative hearing regarding continuation of PO 24-03, City of Cannon Beach application for a text amendment to CBMC short-term rentals. The application will be reviewed against the criteria of CBMC 1794 amendments and the statewide planning goals. Does anyone object to the jurisdiction commission matter at this time? Does any commission member believe he or she has a conflict of interest or personal bias? Do we have a staff report?
Yeah, at the last meeting, you might recall, we had received a letter pretty late before the meeting started from an attorney, Dean Alterman, on behalf of a couple of the short-term rental management companies in town. The attorney was recommending that the Plan Commission recommend against the regulations. He had indicated a number of different things in his letter that we didn't have a real good opportunity to digest. We're still kind of going through that as a staff, but he mentioned a couple of different things in terms of Cannon Beach policies and the housing policy and the economy policy, and how those refer to the short-term rentals as presently they're in the comp plan and they're related as land use decisions. The thought behind the effort was to take the short term out of the land use process. So we're taking a look at how best to address those, and some options include amending the comprehensive plan. We're not super excited about thinking about that. Taking the current action now while leaving the comp plan as is, or other options. And so we just staff wanted to continue to have the opportunity to work with the attorney to make sure we're headed in the right direction before giving any type of recommendation. And so we are asking for a continuance in order to do that. With some of that information, we may need to actually, once we make a decision as to what might be the best approach, whether or not there's additional guidance from council who directed us to go this way. So we just wanted to take a bit more time before going in a specific direction.
Appreciate that. And I assume we have recent correspondence was the message from you today.
Right.
Request for continuance.
Right.
Nothing further. Okay. So I'm going to call for public testimony at this time. Persons who testify shall first receive recognition from the chair, state their full name and mailing address, and if appearing in a representative capacity, identify whom they represent. Is there a presentation by the applicant?
Not at this point in time, just.
Are there presentations by proponents? I don't have anyone online. Are there presentations by opponents? I don't think there's going to be a staff response. So I think at this time, we will close the public hearing and move to consideration. We've got a request for continuance in front of us. What's the?
The continuance is a suggestion to the November meeting. Do you think staff will have a chance to?
Yeah. What I'd like to do is I would like to put it on the November meeting. I think that's enough time. I don't want to come back to you guys and ask for another one, but I think that might be enough time to get some of that direction that we need. So I would like to do it to the November 26th meeting.
Does someone wish to make a motion?
I move that we move this discussion to November 26th.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Tessa, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Sinclair,
Yes.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Commissioner Matusek,
Yes.
Commissioner Orloff,
Yes.
Commissioner Baker,
Yes.
Vice President.
Yes. This item is continued to November 26th. Moving to the next item of the agenda, this is a work session item. Oh, sure. We've got a break request, so we'll take a break for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Nikki.
We are moving on to our next item. I might be able to. Regarding proposed zoning code housing amendments. I believe we have a report from Herbstworks.
Yes. I'm back here to talk to you about the next stage of the housing code amendments that we've been working on since May in the charrette. And I wanted to actually have the document pulled up so I could walk you through it. Thank you, Robert. These are the last several pages of the packet, if you wanted to look at it yourself. Starting on page 8 of the PDF. So what I want to cover tonight with you is, did I hear you correctly? At the last Planning Commission work session, we agreed to pursue, there was a part A, there was a part B. Part A had to do with specific development code provisions. And they were all listed. We went through them. I'll go through them again tonight. And then there was a part B, which was the question of should some of those provisions be eligible only for housing that meets some a goal. And I'd offered a few options for you to consider. Should it be affordability? It would be limited to housing that's affordable. Or would it be housing that's long-term, not short-term rental or residential long-term or rental long-term? And you opted to, there were 3 choices there really. One was just make these provisions by right, don't have any requirements. The second was make them available only if someone's providing affordable housing, or third, make them available if someone's providing long-term housing. And you opted for the long-term option. And so we discussed implications of that with staff. How is staff going to manage that? How do other cities do that? I provided some background on all of that. And we discussed that at the Planning Commission. And since that time, we've had 2 housing committee groups. They were exactly the same agenda. And a couple of people attended both. We discussed the same thing, it's just that we couldn't have everyone in a single housing focus group. So we held 2. And we agreed to this package that's in front of you. So if I could walk you through just a high-level overview and then go dig into the details. what it consists of is a table that lists out the different amendments that we would be creating and their applicability. And we do that for the R1 and R2 zoned lots. There's two types of applicability in that table, and I'll go through that in a minute. And then we talk about the C1 downtown or the C1 zoned lots. And those have additional different provisions that would apply to them. But many of the applicability issues are the same. And then table 3 lists for consideration the owner occupancy requirements, language that we may want to use. It needs to be refined, but it's something to start the discussion. And then following that is an attachment that lists all of the different articles and provisions that will be amended. Finally, at the end is an actual code amendment summary table. This is an example of how this will look when I come forward, hopefully in the next, with the actual track change language. And that's on the last 2 pages of the, I believe. Sorry, there's one more page. And that one is attachment D. We are continuing to amend all the other provisions of the code from top to bottom. These are the more miscellaneous things. And so this table at the top of what's named 7, but is actually page 64, it shows our schedule. We're going to go through this process of adopting the housing related amendments, and then going through these package of more miscellaneous amendments that are listed here. Definitions and zoning district uses would come next. Approval processes would come next. Parking related amendments would come next. And we would be trying to get these done February and March of 2025. Then there would be a round of general cleanup. And finally, if you opted for this, there would be signs. This assumes that the tree ordinance is adopted and that we're simply going through the other things after that. So let me go back to the top and walk you through the housing related amendments for the R1 and R2 zoned lots. On the left side of the table column, you can see that we are planning to reduce the FAR. We're planning for some development standards changes. We are eliminating ADU size requirements. Those are all described more fully in the amendment, in the description. And I don't know if people want me to go through each one of those, or if you've read this ahead of time, but those 3 FAR reduction development standards and the ADU changes would apply to new dwellings and conversions in R1 and R2. They would not be eligible for short-term rental licensing. Then there are additional amendments that would apply only to new dwellings and conversions that meet the owner occupancy requirement. These would also not be eligible for short-term rental licensing. Let me just describe those 4 types of changes. One is that these parking requirements to 1 per dwelling unit for housing. And we would allow someone to meet those parking requirements using on-street spaces. We would allow dormers to be exempt from the FAR calculation. And we would allow type 1 procedure for a reduction of front and rear setbacks by 5 feet. And we would grant an increase of 0.5 FAR for a development that consists of 2 dwelling units.
Is that?
It's
Yeah.
2.5
Right.
FAR, not of point FAR, correct?
An increase of 0.5.
So 0.5 plus.
Yes.
So that's going to
That you get.
say 0.85 of the lot. I thought we had originally discussed a
I
much.
think the discussion was that it would be an increased 2.5.
Yeah,
2.5. 2.
to 0.5.
I think I remember that being the discussion. This might be a typo.
Correct.
So we're reducing the permitted FAR to 0.35 for 1 unit.
And then granting it back up to 0.5 if you have 2 dwellings.
Make sure that I understand what you're saying here. Is that a total of 0.5?
Yes.
Dwelling
Yes.
units? Okay. So the exact language that we want there is grant an increase of 0.05.
No.
0.5%.
Increase 2.5%. 0.5.
Increase of 0.15.
Right.
That's what it.
You could
Yeah,
say
you
an
can do
increase,
I'm sorry, that's.
reach a FAR of 0.5.
Make just a suggestion or a comment. What if it was granted an increase up to a maximum FAR of 0.5?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Grant a maximum increase up to 0.5. Correct?
I think you originally said grant an increase up to a maximum of.
Yes, yes, I'm sorry. That's correct. We don't care if it's less.
Exactly.
Grant an increase up to a maximum of,
0.5.
and 0.5 and 0.5 are the same, but
Yes, mathematically, generally one says the 0.5, just to be absolutely clear.
so we should be saying reduce permitted FAR to 0.35 for 1 unit. I'm,
That's
okay,
above, and so we're back here at table 1, FAR give back. That's what we're talking about the language.
we're talking about zeros and points and,
So single dwelling, 35%. 2 dwellings,
50%. If it meets the owner occupancy requirements. So that's not just across the board.
any other points about the FAR? So there's a tree code relief piece here that was not part of the original charrette. It's something that has been discussed in a limited way with some people, not the whole group. But I have kept it in here for discussion here tonight. And now that you have reviewed the tree ordinance, I would like to add an additional suggestion that, so the idea with the tree code relief, I may not have worded it right. I tried to word this in the way that I could, knowing nothing about the tree ordinance, just in concept. And it says waive tree removal in lieu fee for tree removal if after the completion of the multi-step evaluation process, tree removal is found to be necessary. And I would like to make an additional suggestion that for housing, so this is housing that is meeting owner occupancy requirements, that you would also consider waiving the cost of the city arborist. And not necessarily waiving the cost, but perhaps paying for it out of the tree fund. So the concept was brought to me was how do we make it less of a penalty for housing that's meeting your objectives?
I don't object to that. I mean, we'd have to look at it a little bit closer, but
What if it was only?
yeah, we'd
Yeah, I think
have
it should
to
be covered.
discuss it, but I think it's a possible idea.
That's why I'm bringing it.
Yeah, I think it's.
Way that can move forward unless I bring language to you and you say
No.
we're on the right track or no, we're not.
Should we go to the extent of not only the tree removal fees, but also the tree fund fees?
I think that was the intention, both, yeah.
Okay.
So person would still pay the basic permit fee, is that correct? But what they're not paying is for the city arborist or to pay into the tree fund.
That's the goal, to save money for the types of houses that are going to need them.
And the tree removal application as well.
The tree, the process of going through the evaluation of the alternative actions and prioritizing the trees, that would still be required of the applicant. But when it came time to remove a tree or pay into a tree fund, that would be waived.
Good use of the tree fund.
Good news.
Good use of the tree fund.
So, oh, you mean to pay the arbors?
You use the tree fund to cover the costs of the arborist's time.
You know, I hesitate to make any, I think it's a great idea, but we had a team of people and we only have two of them here on the committee, and I hesitate to commit, Marcy.
We've got plenty of opportunity to
Yeah.
work on the language.
Yeah, that's good. I think it's a great idea, but we gotta talk.
I do think you're on the right track, though.
Yeah.
To identify the parts of the tree code that,
Needs to come before the whole committee.
yeah, I agree. But I think these are things that
They're ideas.
we should talk about.
There are a lot of them. I mean, system development charges were something that you could consider, but we're trying to scale this slowly.
I think we have to also think about owner occupancy is important, but maybe there should be a tier for affordable housing as opposed to owner occupancy. So maybe all fees are waived if it's actually affordable housing for individuals below 80% AMI, for instance. And then maybe there's a different tier where some fees are waived or not all for owner occupancy, because I do think we need to reserve some incentives for truly affordable housing as well.
I agree on
And that is when we really need to be.
We need those fees.
To keep the fees.
I agree with you.
down.
That's not a bad idea.
So if maybe that could be part of the consideration, is that right now, if we're only talking about owner occupancy, not every fee is waived, but some portion, maybe the replacement cost is waived. But they're still paying their permit fee, and then if it's an affordable housing project, it's no permit fee and no replacement cost.
So how would that apply to, say, a person who's building two buildings on one lot? Would that only go towards the low housing and the rental, or?
Well, would the rental be limited to individuals with 80% AMI? I think in that case, I personally would say it is a whole project designed to build an affordable unit. And then you treat that development as one development.
It's a multifamily development.
Right, exactly. But again, this is an open discussion. I just want us to be sure that we are saving some incentives for truly affordable housing. We do want to incentivize long-term permanent residents, but let's be thoughtful.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I think one other comment I would just kind of make is I know a lot of fees are determined by council and we have a fee schedule.
Yes.
So it's something that we can all talk about, but would still need, that wouldn't go necessarily, I mean, parts of it could go in the zoning ordinance, but we have a fee schedule. And so that fee schedule would have to be amended and adopted.
One question about the on-street parking. And that's, I'm going to give this to you, Aaron, as a possible representative of the fire. Do the current streets, would they be possible to do that? Is that either, within the right of way?
I can't
For fire
necessarily,
access?
I can't necessarily speak to that. I drive a fire engine, but I don't make those rules. I'm not a fire code
Right.
person. The fire marshal would be the person to ask that question. John
About
Jerome.
that, because if we run into a situation where we have two houses adjacent to each other with people parking in the right of way on both sides, that's going to restrict the flow of the street.
Well, many of the streets currently, especially presidential's, it's north side of street parking is the only side that you're permitted to park on now. So
Does that carry over on the, excuse my ignorance, the east side of Hemlock as well?
yeah, both east and west of Hemlock, through the presidential's, it's north side of street parking is the only permitted to be parked on.
Mhm.
The south side is restricted, and I think it's the rationale for that is possibility of
Right.
vehicles.
That's
Because you only have
area I'm more
one side.
concerned
Yeah,
about, Southtown, their gravel streets, they're much wider.
yeah, and they can park on both sides.
Yeah.
on-
It's the
down there.
same thing for Forest Lawn, and there might be a problem on Ross or Elliott, we'd have to look at that.
Forest Lawn is already too narrow.
Well, except down there where there are no houses, yeah, but when you widen out, I've got a lot of right of way that I.
Oh, yeah, you got plenty of room there.
That I can't do anything with.
But coming in the one way is.
So do we have a concern in an area like the presidential with saying that your off-street counts, but some people don't have off-street? If you're on the wrong side of the road, I mean.
Yeah, that's another question.
Oh, well, the thinking was Portland, you may not be able to park in front of your house. You might have to park a block away. I mean,
Right.
and it's been beat into us is we seem to have a house that reserves space for cars, not people. So
Yeah.
we're just trying to turn that a
Sure.
little bit.
Well, I could just
Okay.
imagine someone in front of their house and response to the person they're parking in front.
Yeah, we are all kind of.
Yeah, and so one of the things I was gonna say, and I'm not saying right, wrong, and different, I'm just bringing it up is, there are other options. It could be just simply one parking space instead of the required two off-site.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that we shouldn't think on the street. The streets are thin. They get packed in the summer. We got lots of issues. Just things to think about. I'm not saying that's the way we should go or shouldn't, but the other options are, I think right now you have to have a minimum of two, even reducing that down to one on site. Those are things to potentially consider.
Yeah, they're good points, but I'm also thinking of all the developments gonna go on, how many of these are gonna be low cost that are gonna get a parking concession, right? There's gonna be a handful of them. Our goal is to maybe try to create 10 to 15 units a year if we were successful.
Yeah.
So I think we can grow into this.
I just wanted to bring it up.
No, I think it's a good point, but I just think we could grow into it too. So.
I just wanted a little clarification. It's kind of what you were talking about, Steve. So where I read under parking relief, reduce parking requirements to one per dwelling unit, is that specifically on-site parking? Or
I think the way it's written is one on site.
does that imply you could have no on-site parking and then the second sentence could kick in?
Yeah.
That's the circumstance. It may not work.
Yeah. So.
Well, you'd have to, this provision, if you agree to move forward with it, this provision would be written so that it would only, let's take the two pieces one at a time, parking relief. So again, this is only for those dwellings that meet owner occupancy requirements. You should reduce parking to one per dwelling unit. And then if on-street parking is feasible, and we can specify this with language in the code, then an additional option would be to use on-street parking for that space.
Using a word like feasible probably won't meet the clear and objective standard. So
No, I have written many cities' language like this. So it specifies if the street is a certain width, the right of way is a certain width. If it's not, this wouldn't apply here, but if it's not a emergency response route, so there are ways to say that and it also has to be within a certain radius of that dwelling unit. It doesn't have to be right in front of it. And so if you give me permission to move forward with this, I would come back with the exact language for additional review.
So really what it's talking about is right now we have a 15-foot
right.
typical front yard setback. We have a type 1 procedure to reduce that by 5 feet. That's 10 feet. A required parking spot is 9 by 18. So still be able to parallel at least one car in front of that site if no other options are available, pushing that house and taking up its width.
Right. The goal is to get those incentives out of it. Oh, shit. I'm sorry.
Welcome.
The goal is to provide those incentives, and parking is a very good incentive.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And
It does tend to cost, might know, but $50,000 to $75,000 to provide, and we're trying to make way for more housing. While we're on this topic of parking, I would like to go through the ADU section, just at the bottom. numbered 1, but also page 58. Because some of these ADU amendments are required by this, and I want everyone to understand what we're going forward with. Something that came out of the charrette was to eliminate the distinction between an ADU and a primary dwelling and just allow 2 dwelling units per lot. But what happened when we were in our last housing focus group was it became clear that if we're going to meet this ADU requirements for the state, we really have to split it out. So right now you can build 2 dwelling units in R2, right? And only 1 in R1. But you could build in R1, 1 dwelling unit and an accessory dwelling unit, right? And the accessory dwelling unit comes with, by state rule, we have to eliminate parking requirements, design review requirements, and owner occupancy requirements. That's required by Senate Bill 1051 for ADUs. So you can kind of see like the system that we now have to work with. I think earlier in the charrette, our ambition was to actually eliminate the difference between R1 and R2. But I don't think that there's enough support for that level of change. So what we must do is change the ADU requirement. And some of you might have figured out by now that this actually means that you could have 3 dwelling units in R2, because you could have your 2 units plus an ADU. And I'm just wondering what people think of that.
By state law, we can't prohibit ADUs, correct?
Correct.
Or really duplexes. I guess we can because we're small enough, but.
With the reduction in the FAR actually limited on its own.
Say that again?
The proposed reduction of what would be 50%?
Yeah.
Would sort of be self-limiting on 3 dwelling units.
But we did during the charrette, and this is kind of marked in the footnote, that we might go back to a concept that was discussed during the charrette where we grant an additional FAR, give back for that 3rd unit. That's something cities are doing. Is that something that you might want to consider? But otherwise, like you say, the FAR max is self-limiting.
I personally would like to see us take some steps, see how they go. And then before we jump completely into 3 dwelling units and endorsing that, let's see if we can get a sense of how this is working. But that's just my take.
Yeah, 50% is restrictive.
It is.
I think there would have to be some sort of incentive based on FAR for one additional, which could just be a simple studio. It doesn't have to be 600 square feet. It could be 300. And what percentage is that add for the ADU?
Right, that's the question.
Right.
So the way this would work is if you're in an R1 zone, you can build 2 duplexes, but you have to provide parking spaces for each of those on site. If you're in R1 and you decide, no, not going to take advantage of the duplex, I'm going to take advantage of this primary dwelling unit and ADU, you only have to provide 2 parking spaces, right? In R1, that's what you get today. You can build 1 unit, provide the parking for that unit and an ADU. And under the new compliant rules, you would not have to provide a parking space. But you might, so I'm just saying it's kind of a conundrum because in R1, you might actually see people taking advantage of the ADU rather than the duplex provisions. Because parking is actually a very big deal. And if people don't have to provide it, and they can still, most people still want a parking space, so they figure out how to have a parking space.
No,
They don't provide it on the site.
Currently, it's 2 per per dwelling, and ADU bumps in an extra one, so that's, three on the site, so I think, that reduction for the ADU is at least efficient.
You would have one primary dwelling and two parking spaces for that and none for the ADU. Do you still have your two parking spaces for each dwelling unit? So
Marcy, you're telling us you're telling us we have maybe a little problem with the inconsistency? Is that what you're suggesting, that, we're not gonna incentivize the kind of duplex activity we want with the parking because the ADU rules are preventing us, or?
I'm saying that because your city is so small, it's not subject to the state rules for middle housing, at least not yet. It may happen that you do fall into those rules because they are changing all the time.
Yeah.
But so you still have the choice to require two parking spaces per dwelling unit.
Okay.
That is not permitted under the middle housing rules, like just across the way down past Neocotty Mountain in all of Tillamook County. They've agreed to subject themselves to the large city middle housing rules. So they're changing their zoning codes, small city,
Yeah.
large city, county. And no parking is required. One parking space is required per dwelling unit, not two.
Figure out how the ADU complicates our analysis, and it seems to be that in a certain zone, a single dwelling with an ADU, the way things are working, would not have to have parking for.
For one, I mean, I'm not saying, I don't think it's a complication. I actually think it's an opportunity.
That's what it is.
I think it's
But I think it's a kind of perverse opportunity.
a different option for somebody
Okay.
to do something not necessarily negative.
And we get what we want out of it. We get that unit.
Still get more
But it may-
small houses.
It may not mean that it's, because it's not a give back based on owner occupancy.
Mhm.
It might be a vacation home.
Right, and that, yeah.
And they still get the same benefit. It looks exactly the same as if someone went through the hoops of saying, I'm going to be a long-term resident or provide this for long-term residents, and then they get the give back.
I got it.
So it kind of circumvents the give back idea.
Yep. Okay, thank you, Marcy.
So if we could just look up above that one, that cell that I was just talking about, to the development standards. Let me make sure I got this right. So we're allowing primary dwelling and accessory dwelling in any configuration, stacked, attached, detached. And I propose that we increase the allowance for an ADU from 600 square feet to shall not exceed the square footage of the primary dwelling. It still has to be an accessory dwelling or a secondary dwelling, but it can be almost the same size.
Is there a state requirement about eliminating ADU size requirements? So that could remain size limited, but this is a choice.
Yes.
When you say that, would the ADU still be under the 35% lot coverage?
Let me just see if that's what we did with that.
And so I was wondering if it would actually double the lot coverage, because if they don't see a 5,000 square foot lot, 35% coverage is 1,750, and then it's saying not to exceed the square footage of the primary dwelling, that bumps up to 3,500.
Over the 50 we have now.
Yeah.
How do you, I'm sorry, I'm missing the math because I see that statement explicitly state that combined dwellings shall meet the requirements for height, setback, and fire that apply to the base zone. So to me, that means that that ADU plus the house has to fit in the FAR.
Yes.
It has to fit in the 35%.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was.
Yes.
Yeah.
So under that scenario that we would keep it at 600 square feet, you would have 0.35 for one unit, and then you'd have 600 square feet for your ADU.
So I thought that, I think that's what we're getting that's where we're getting confused. So the FAR is 0.35, and I thought that was for the entire project, whether it was one unit or two, but you're saying you're envisioning that as per unit?
0.5 for an additional unit. Max. Otherwise, because I don't think you could limit a primary dwelling to 0.35 and the ADU, keep it at 600 square feet.
Right.
Or being included in that.
Right, it couldn't be included in the 0.35.
In the FAR give back,
Yeah.
we're referencing 2 dwelling units. So it would go from 0.35. If you have an ADU, then you have a total flexibility of 0.5.
If it's a long-term,
If it's,
long-term, if it's not long-term, if we take the example of a home and an ADU that has chosen not to take advantage of long-term, together, my understanding is they're limited to 0.35. Is that correct?
That's
what I understand.
That's what I was thinking.
Okay.
Are we correct, Marcy?
Wait, a single dwelling is limited to 0.35.
And if you wanted an
I was looking at
ADU,
that term, wondering how this works. So you are saying it's 0.35 for the primary plus on top another 600 feet for the ADU, because in that case, I think the ADU size limit should remain.
Yes.
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can't eliminate the ADU size limit if that's how we're defining FAR.
well, the FAR is, we've always calculated as the total floor area ratio of all units on the lot, correct?
That's
Correct.
50% though.
Yeah.
Right, when it was large enough to do that.
5,000 square
Yeah,
foot lot.
so if we keep an ADU of 600, that's a fair trade-off.
Trade-off,
Yeah.
yeah. Because we gotta have a gift for the reduced date.
Right, exactly.
And so then how does that affect the ADU state law of owner occupancy requirements? If we're not allowed to require owner occupancy.
This is
that
the way
This is part of the give back.
Yeah.
Well, if it were to be part of the give back,
It's not, it's not.
that's
Give back.
that's an option.
But
Yeah,
I see.
Yeah, it would have to be separate from.
Yeah.
Completely separate from owner.
Yeah.
Or
It's not.
meet owner occupancy requirements.
that makes there, somewhat of an incentive to go for the owner occupancy additional unit.
right. Which I think,
But then you still have to provide the extra parking. I mean, I think this is going to be a puzzle for, and people will be figuring out what to do.
I think that's true.
So before I talk about this, the C1 zoned lots with street facing property line on North Spruce Street, let me just walk you through the owner occupancy requirements. At the last meeting, I thought we agreed that owner occupancy requirements would be the leverage that we would use, not income-based, et cetera, but I just heard a discussion about maybe we should have only allow certain provisions to apply to affordable housing. So if I hear that idea come up again.
No, I'm not saying this is for your current work. I'm saying that if the tree group is thinking about, for instance, tree give back, instead of giving everything purely based on owner occupancy, save some tiers for a later revision that includes affordability. Because I agree right now, you have enough to do simply to provide some level of give back for long term. It was just a suggestion that as people think about what makes sense for a give back on the tree code relief, save a little bit for a future date to be an affordability incentive.
Okay.
Do you see that for all zones, R1, R2 and or strictly
Yeah.
R1, R2?
I think so. Yeah.
Right, so then I'd like to know if we can move forward with some version of table 3 amendments, owner occupancy requirements. And what I have here, something that we discussed at the Housing Focus Group. This is language from another city. Other cities are using language similar. In other cities, they're often applying it to tax exemption, for example, for housing, for affordable housing. One thing I need to make clear here is that this is not in the land use, it's not in the development. This would be a new title. Should there be a new number that's available, we would put this here, and this might become your housing title. This might become where you put your future affordability requirements. But for now, we're sticking with owner occupancy requirements. So this just, I haven't received any comments except from Mike about this, that they may not be rented. It does need to be changed because that wasn't the intention. The intention was that it could be rented, but only for terms longer than 6 months. Is that the, okay. So part 3, number 3, dwellings may not be rented at any time during the exemption period would be either struck entirely or it would be specified.
Or maybe simply just say cannot be used for short-term rentals.
We already say that. We say that in the development code that none of this new housing is eligible for short-term rentals.
Right.
I mean, if going with one, with the rewording of one, getting rid of the tax exemption portion of one, having it like a 1A within it, that long-term rentals for periods greater than 6 months could apply in lieu of owner occupancy.
Is that what you're
That's
saying?
It's still maintaining 3
And for longer than 6 months could be as good as an owner.
as good as owner occupancy.
I think that was your intention with adding.
That was my intention.
Yeah. I was just suggesting it, combining it up with that, the definition of owner occupancy.
I would probably change this, the title of, or the name of this section, owner occupancy or long-term rental requirements. The purpose of this section is that gives staff a way to judge whether the applicant can meet it and also maintain it. Can it be enforced?
Like everything.
It's gonna be a stretch, but there are tools they can use that are pretty, I mean, you're not gonna catch everybody. Just,
No.
you don't catch everybody now.
An applicant must verify by oath or affirmation in application that the proposed construction will meet the following owner occupancy, and I'm going to add long-term rental requirements. That's the first paragraph. The, the numbered sections, or number 2 is really about hardship provisions.
Ask a question.
Please.
Bill, I don't know if you're still with us. We're taking a look at table 3. It's called amendments and see requirements. And I was just wondering, it talks about the very first paragraph, an applicant must verify by oath or affirmation in the application. Is there something more specific or concrete? Is this something that we think is working? I guess, I just want something that we feel comfortable with long-term, that we have something that we feel confident in that is the proper document to sign.
Yeah, and part of this, we've got to see what the actual language says, but this is consistent with how we typically do land use, which is people say, I'm going to do X, then comes the enforcement piece is always a harder part. And you've got an oath or affirmation. And what happens if the neighbors say, this is, they're no longer being owner occupied. And then we're back to the enforcement issue.
Yeah, but that oath or affirmation is fine as far as the document to use to start this off initially.
Yes, and there might be, a covenant of some kind that we require of these types of things to make sure that it's recorded, that if somebody purchases it, they're aware of those restrictions. And there are other things, but ultimately, the question that's sort of in here is, what do we have in the code when somebody comes in to apply? And, when somebody comes in to apply, we want to make sure that the person applying says, yep, this is what I'm going to do. And then, forward looking, we have, covenant or something like that to make sure that it continues. But the trouble is going to be these types of things get approved, and 10 years down the road, something goes different and you've got, neighbors complaining or what have you. And so the ultimate enforcement is going to require time and effort.
Yeah, I understand that part, but you would think that as far as that oath or affirmation, that it probably should be a recorded covenant of some type so that at least it follows the property.
Yeah, I would,
I'm looking for long-term,
right.
Benefit, yeah.
Restriction.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So I just want to make sure, and we don't have to necessarily solve it like this evening. I just want it to be thought of as to what the best way is so that, as time goes by, just like you're talking about, and should an enforcement come up or whatever, at least that documentation is there and been signed off on.
Agreed.
And the oath or affirmation is a good way to start, for the initial builder. But, what we'd want is, something that follows the property.
Prior to occupancy permit being issued, owner shall provide a covenant, something to that effect.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
Where would that go?
I'm thinking maybe somewhere, I don't know, it's in that table 3. And I don't know if it would be, a number 4 or if it would be part of that first paragraph. But something that's just more long-term documentation that gets recorded. So I think unless anyone else has.
No, agree.
Like a third step in oath, affirmation, or.
Right. Because I think the affirmation or the oath is kind of the initial application that gets you that. But I think before you get your occupancy permit or something,
Appropriate time.
at least we still have a hammer to make sure that, and if you don't, then I guess if you don't.
It'd have to go in the deed, but that's where it would be followed.
Yeah. I just want the covenant so long-term it's there.
That makes sense. I was reading the text.
That long-term rental or owner occupancy is verified, some sort of deed restriction or some sort of record that goes with the deed.
Yeah.
And this must be provided before you receive your occupancy.
Right. And maybe you and I can work on, I can maybe toss some things out there too to you.
Okay, that would be very helpful. I think that should go into the first paragraph.
The way number 1 is worded toward the end, it talks about residents of the title holder receiving the tax exemption during the tax exemption period. And I don't think you're talking about doing any tax exemptions unless I missed something. But it seems like that's the hammer that in that condition they would have if they don't comply with the covenant, then you would remove the tax exemption, but you can't take back the things you're going to offer them that we're currently talking about. I'm not sure how you're going to enforce it. Not initially, but if ownership changes 10 years from now and they choose not to follow the covenant, I don't know what you're going to do.
Number 1 is maybe reworded in some fashion to talk about this. So I think you're right. It might not be the tax exemption. It just might be just the long-term covenant that provides that. But we can look at that one, Marcy.
Okay. So in the interest of moving on, the last kind of conceptual thing I want to get your approval on so I could move forward with track change amendments is about table 2. So these development standard amendments that are listed here, They all come from the charrette. They now only apply to new dwellings and conversions in the downtown area or in the C1 zoned area that meet owner occupancy requirements and are not eligible for short-term rental licensing. But you remember that we switched really the area that this would apply to. So that's why I have this language at the top of the table. Lots with street-facing property line on North Spruce Street between First and Third Avenues. And I know that there's, I put here what I understood to be.
Let's leave it the way it is. Michelle and I had a debate over it, and if you misunderstood it, and I must have misunderstood what we were doing. But everybody else needs to know. The question is, do you go second to third or first to third?
One block,
Well,
second to third.
yeah, that's what I thought.
Public meeting.
Yeah,
It was just second to third. Try that and see how it goes.
Okay.
It was never first to second.
Yeah, because first way would be destroyed.
This is a parking lot anyway.
Well, so
yeah, so second.
First to second is one private property and then
Yeah.
city-owned property anyways, the rest of it.
Second to third.
Yeah, second and third was where I thought we left.
I
think
think
it
so too,
is.
but I didn't know.
Yeah, that's my recollection.
All right. Between second and third. Okay, then, I mean, that's the basic package. I would like to move forward with the actual lot amendments. They will look like what you see on page 5.
Quick question.
Oh, of course.
Did we ultimately land on eliminating mixed use requirement?
Yeah,
I thought we had said we were no longer going to require the 4950. So we were going to take out the percentage, but I thought that there still was going to
Well,
be some mixed use.
There has to be a first floor.
It is actually the change, this is what I recall, is that we eliminated the mixed use requirement. When we were first looking at Hemlock, it was only for the buildings behind. We would still require retail on the ground floor of buildings facing Hemlock.
Right.
When we moved the whole thing over Spruce, we agreed that we would allow standalone residential buildings.
I don't recall. I just don't recall.
That was, I must have been another one of those things.
Yeah,
I thought we were gonna still require the
the
lower
first
floor
floor.
retail
Yeah,
and then residential second dormer allowance for
right.
technically a third.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's still important to the character of downtown
Yeah.
that there remain a commercial component to the buildings. And I think it will naturally be, but I wouldn't want to just eliminate it altogether.
Can we return to the language that we had for Hemlock, which was eliminate the mixed use requirement for or allow standalone residential buildings on the rear of the site?
You know, I'm open to thoughts on that. I just want to be sure that we don't completely eliminate the commercial requirement.
And we do have, it does not allow residential behind courtyards at rear sites, but I agree.
Commercial at the front.
How the commercial, very blanket, it applies to the whole site. It's a very old fashioned, not very, the way people would write that code provision today. They would say that the buildings that face the street, that have frontage on the street, need to have retail presence or a commercial presence. It could be office, it could be retail.
I think when we mapped it out, I mean, we need to decide, but when we mapped it out, it was this standalone residential in the back, so that, you know, street front was retail and,
Yeah.
and behind, if you had room, you know, you could do it.
And that's models that we were looking at the last meeting.
Yeah, they were good.
They showed that, I mean, an entire building is possible on the rear of these sites.
Yeah. If
There's,
So why don't we keep what you have here with the allow residential only building behind courtyards or at the rear, but just not the point where you say eliminate mixed use requirement. So if we just take that out, then I think.
Well, or add commercial on, first floor commercial on street face.
Facing Spruce.
On frontage, street facing.
Yes.
What was the, I mean, I can read eliminate parking requirements for the housing component, but was there, what are you thinking for the parking requirement for the commercial part of it?
At this point, we didn't try to touch that, as I understand, because it was
They don't want
a mess. We can't go there.
No, the parking is a whole nother Pandora's box.
Yeah.
It is our next piece of work, though.
Right, so let's get something done here. That may take us, I don't know how long.
May I ask one question? Are we good with that for now?
I think so.
Yeah.
And some members of the design review board who've been interested in, you know, not requiring ADUs, which I think was in there, but I don't know if the duplex was in there for not having to go to the design review board. I didn't know if that was a give back or if that was in general. I know we've talked about single family and two families not having to go there. And that's been raised by the board as well as and discussed with some of the housing focus groups. I didn't know if that was in there or not.
The proposed strike throughs that I saw eliminated triplexes, duplexes, ADUs.
Yeah. So we could, you know,
You're only required to eliminate ADUs from design review at this point, but I believe you will be at some point soon in the future.
Question for you though, for somebody who was brave enough to take it on, there is an opportunity within design review to, you could, like you said, come up with some designs that get you fast track through a lot of things. But I'm also thinking for commercial mixed use, you know, our standards for design review are so broad that they can't be applied.
that's a whole different conversation. I'm just talking about.
I'm not saying right now,
Right.
but there are people.
Commercial is not residential.
I know, but there are people who are looking for an opportunity to go into those and try to make them a little bit more specific and applicable and enforceable. And we should be encouraging people to maybe look at that within design review and say, take responsibility for your code. If you think it's broken, let's fix it.
And I'm not saying that. I'm just, you know, I think that is gonna come yet as we're doing the code audit. That'll be things we're looking at. I think initially when we're talking about these housing amendments and to make things easier, you know, this would fall into play as far as right now duplexes have to go.
Yeah.
ADUs have to go.
And we can't do design review.
And so what I was just saying is it would be nice to go along with these, which are already saying that those things don't have to go for the give backs.
Yeah.
Why do they need to go in general? And that was, and Michelle, I don't know if you have any comments on that, but that's been the theme, has it not? Why are these duplexes coming to us?
I have a comment. And my comment is, how do you avoid the purple house?
That's a single family home.
No, it's a duplex.
No, it's considered a single
It's a
family.
single family home.
It's a single
There's two
family.
entrances to it, and two, it's a duplex.
The corner house is a single family house, the house immediately west of it.
I'm sorry.
is a duplex.
You know, how do you?
I agree.
Point of order.
Yeah.
Up front, when it was public comment time, Michelle was told to wait till this work session, but to make her comment, but that hasn't gotten to happen yet.
Sure, come on up and make a comment.
Sorry.
I was gonna bring, Marcy is done with her presentation.
Right.
Sorry, it's late. Great work, Marcy and everyone. Michelle Valagura, PO Box 719. Okay. What and why are third places important? It's a place outside your home to work and connect with your community. First being your home and second being your work. I believe mixed use spaces are the beating heart of a community. Our downtown is the beating heart. If you have ever visited our local beloved monument, not Haystack Rock, but Bruce's Candy Kitchen, this is the first and fifth generation family that lives and works right downtown. I've had the pleasure of playing board games and watching Ducks football that I don't understand with a family after we all close up shop and simply gather. This is the epitome of community. I feel the downtown amendment has shrunk and shrunk out of NIMBY fear. I want to remind everyone, things are not the same they were 30 years ago, much less 5 years ago. Smaller footprints and higher density is what we need to supply middle housing. I know change is scary, but we need to think of the future. I'm afraid for me and my community, at the dim outlook and seeing that almost every rental and the rental is in constant danger of. Yes, this is a more intense issue in tourist towns, but allowing people to turn homes into many businesses has made housing insecurity more of a threat than it ever has been. Here are some quotes from a book, sociologist Ray Oldenburg. The book's entitled The Great Good Place, subtitled Cafes, Coffee Shops, Bookstores, Bars, Hair Salons, and Other Hangouts That Are the Heart of Community. As living becomes more expensive, where the means and facilities for relaxation and leisure are not publicly shared, they become the objective of private ownership and consumption. Most needed are these third places, which lend a public balance to increase privatization of home life. Third places are nothing more than an informal public gathering place. Life without community has produced for many a lifestyle and consistently of mainly home to work and back again. Social well-being and psychological health depend upon community. It is no coincidence that the helping professions became a major industry in the United States as the suburban planning helped destroy local public life and community support it once lent. This is now my word. The median starting home price is so far out of balance from where it was 30, 20, or even 5 years ago. I'm an advocate for yes in my backyard, but who knows how long my yard will last. I, like my friends, just want some housing security. After many meetings with the Housing Focus Group, which has been mostly a complete pleasure, with respect, I will remind you, I'm the only member that is in fact not a property owner, so I come at this with a slightly different lens. I also spend a minimum of 8 hours daily downtown. I believe we have all gone back and forth and relaxed each of our views to not just serve ourselves. I relaxed my views when we moved just to Spruce in the downtown area. I did not agree, but in the spirit of progress, I eventually agreed. Then it became between second and third. I never agreed to that. I don't believe that developers are going to scrape the land for possible return that will take years to recoup. My landlord, who owns 2 buildings with 5 businesses occupying, has zero interest in that. I would personally love to see more examples like the Whitebird building with 2 attainable apartments due to the small footprint. The idea here is to encourage people to do the right thing for the community, not just a playground for unoccupied 3,000 square homes on a 5,000 square foot lot. I would encourage everyone to consider expanding the downtown area to include Hemlock and Larch. This feels like one of those things that people will look back in the future and wonder, why did they do it like this? It's like half of a block on one block. Once again, we can't have change without change. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Did you get all the guidance you needed? I want to respond to that. I think Michelle's right. I know what she's feeling, but I just want to say, I hear her say, let's go faster. I hear somebody else tell me go slower. And that's what I think we're all trying to balance here, Michelle. So I hope you'll bear with us while we try to figure this out. I just want to note that in our comprehensive plan, it says change will be slow. It was designed into our community so that we can scale with it and make sure that we don't make mistakes. And I really want to, I think everybody here kind of feels that we're going to do something radical, like doing mixed use downtown and having stuff like that we know what we're doing and make sure we do it correctly the first time. And then we can, if it looks good, I'm sure people will say Hemlock's next, or first and Spruce to second and Spruce. I don't know what it is, but I do hear you. And I want you to know that I understand what you're going through, but I like I said, there are competing things going here, and we're just trying to figure out how to make our way through them. Thanks.
So Marcy, we have a work session, joint code audit session coming up. Did you have a comment about that?
Yeah. I know there's a lot of interest. There's an election coming up on that day. And I just wanted to mention to people that that date could be potentially changing due to a lot of other things going on.
Then send out a poll today, try and get another date.
That's what I'm saying. It's not set yet, but we've sent that to council because of all the other things that are going on that evening. So I think the thought was to potentially change the work session to a different date.
Which is probably good because Marcy, it seems like you're going to need more time.
Well, the joint session was about the vacancy tax and a presentation from Related Development Company. And Chet provided some questions for them, and it was specifically to look at how does a request for proposal and a developer relationship, a city developer relationship work for a site like the RV site.
So that's separate. When would you anticipate then that you would have some draft language related to these changes?
Well, first of all, let me ask you, I don't know that the Joint Commission is the best place to come forward with draft language. I think a planning commission work session is. And the Joint Commission is more, but that's just my idea.
I feel as though there's so much going on here that we probably need council to say, is this even the direction that's acceptable? So maybe I anticipated it would be one joint session when you have some draft language. And then once everyone is approved, then you move to planning commission with an actual proposal.
I guess, yeah, but I thought that we've had since May, at least 3.
Pretty specific conversation tonight that I have a feeling council has not been tracking.
Which issue would that be? Just
So as we went through tonight, table 1, table 2, when we discussed the FAR reductions, exactly what those numbers were going to be, I think at this point, I would be concerned that this may be a complete surprise to council.
Will be.
Where is their next meeting? I mean, couldn't we get just 30 minutes in the next meeting to go through this and say, what do you guys think?
November 5th is the next council.
Yeah, I think,
But I mean,
but that's the thing. You guys.
After that, once that happens, can't we do that? Just 30, I know it's a lot, but.
Let us have the opportunity to talk and see what's up.
And maybe you ask council whether they want to see this, but I am concerned that we could go a long way down this road and it gets to council and it's not going to end up being acceptable. So I think it makes sense to have a little bit of input before Marcy puts too much time into this.
we have 2 council members on the housing committee.
And there's 3 that aren't.
I'm willing to do it however you think is best. I also trying to understand the most expedient process to get to amendments. We had Jared in May brought any of these same concepts, the exact numbers to the Joint Commission at least twice. And
This is much more specific, and I really think it's important right now, right at the go, before you put in all that work for this, a joint session.
Well, can we, if you want to put in the work, Mars, put in the work, right? If you want to write code, I
But
don't
the
think
city's
it.
paying for her to do that. So no, it's not.
Right.
So
That code has to be written anyway. It might not be
no,
what
because
she
the
has
chance
up
of
with.
completely revising that doesn't make
The
sense.
concepts behind the code have to be,
Yeah,
they should go to the joint session first.
and I thought
And this, they haven't,
No.
it's form,
okay.
not this specific, it's
Okay.
not gone before council.
Is there any way that, like, if we set that one up, that we couldn't put this on the same meeting?
which
With the joint, the one that we are gonna have for the,
on the 5th?
like on that agenda? I mean, we're obviously gonna change that date, but couldn't we have that as another item on that joint session?
Yes, we could.
And whether or not one of the, we can talk about this, but whether or not one of the things that are scheduled on there, whether we bump that, I don't know, but I guess what I'm hearing is we'd rather have this to discuss at the next joint meeting compared to the policy discussion.
But I'm not saying it has to displace policy, but I do think that before Herbs Works puts in a lot of time writing new code for this purpose, that we should do a brief check-in as quick as here's the proposal in the tables. Walk through that, make sure that, okay, it doesn't need to be a whole work session, but I do think this, we have gone through a specific enough process at this point that it makes sense to check in.
And to the extent of just basically an amendment to what we have here today.
It's the It would be this packet. I'm just make sure that I understand. It would be this package with the changes that we've talked about
Right,
tonight.
right.
All right. I'm happy to do it that way.
Yeah.
What is it that we're seeking at that meeting? How should I frame the question?
For this piece,
Mhm.
I think it would simply be to say that you had a work session with planning commission. At this point, you are planning to move forward with these particular changes. And you just want to make sure that the joint commissions concur. It doesn't have to be complex, but I would like to know that city council generally agrees that this is the direction that they would approve.
Asking for them to give their general agreement.
Right.
I think it would be asking the same question that you were asking for tonight from us,
Exactly.
but we don't feel comfortable making that decision without council's buy-in as well. And now that we've had the whole discussion of some of these details that we had concerns with, then bringing that final outline package to council with us to say, hey, should we move forward and spend all this time doing these things? That is the same thing that you're asking for us tonight, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's helpful because we're gonna have to do all the DLC notice and all the PAPA and all the, so I think maybe getting some of that concurrence now makes a lot of sense so that when we start submitting everything and bringing everything back, everyone's at least had an opportunity to see it,
Yeah.
All right. Do we have anything else for this work session item? All right, if we'll close this item. Thank you, Marcy, for your patience as always. You're welcome. On to informational items. We have the tree report.
Just a moment. For September, there were 2 tree permits issued, one of which was issued to Mr. Lerma at 179 East First Street. That was with a total of 9 to be removed, with required replanted 8. The second was on the undeveloped tax lot near the water tower up here by Sunset. This is in conjunction with the infrastructure replacement project up there. There were to be 74 trees removed with no replanting requirement due to the number of trees on the property. This is the area that the city has been working with the conference center in order to have a construction easement and all of that in order to replace upon the hill immediately west of the Sunset exit.
Even though there's none required to be replanted, will there be some replanted?
My understanding is no.
Okay.
The understanding is that these are the trees that have to be cleared out in order to provide sufficient space for the water tank and the area that it needs to have around it.
If and when the tree code is changed, the outcome would be different, I think, a little bit, but I get it under this code. I get how we get to where we are.
Yeah, and with this specific type of application here yes, it is a large number of trees, and that is understood, but this is kind of an atypical situation. And it also is an undeveloped lot. It's a large undeveloped lot with a critical infrastructure component versus a residential development.
True. That's true.
Yeah, and I think we only got a certain amount of footage to work with the conference center in order to get this done.
Yeah.
And so it's not like we have just a ton of property. We have our easement.
Mhm.
I mean, we could always talk to the conference center to see if they're willing.
I get it.
That's just the difficulty in this one.
I get it. I always, I'm not gonna keep anybody, but I always struggle with how much you require the city, as opposed to what you require of our other applicants. And this might be a different situation. I think some of them probably are, some of them aren't. And, you know, at least a tree report would have been good, but I know you're moving fast, so. I just struggle with that every time it comes up. What do we do? Because I know if it were somebody else, I'd say, give me a tree report.
I know Jeff Gearhart was involved in reviewing this application.
Okay, all right, that helps a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, he's been involved with city projects, and if I remember correctly, he did provide feedback that came with that application.
Thank you for that input.
And enforcement's always been a concern.
Yeah.
Always, and you know, stepping aside, I'm open to learn a project and I'll make sure that those trees are replaced, but outside of that, you know, we have a code enforcement person, and I think that, you know, we should start thinking of how we can direct him to assist with that.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I'm sure that we're not meeting our goals with that.
Well, there's a goal under this code and there's a goal that would occur under the next code. And somewhere is Stephen and Robert, and I'd like to talk to you about how I articulate my concerns about the city trying to follow some of the procedures that the rest of us follow. And I know this is a different project and I'll let it go now, but help me with that if you would.
Absolutely. And I mean, some of that, a lot of the stuff we're doing is on the private property. This is a little bit different because it was the easement and the infrastructure.
Yeah.
But I get it. And it's not like we're trying to do anything, just so you guys know, I don't get the.
You know what, though, when it happened, I started having people screaming in my ears and it's like, interesting, but I didn't see it. So it's not my problem, but I would like to know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Any other comments on the tree report? Moving on to the next item, anything for good of the order?
I guess we continued a bunch of stuff, but remember Tuesday, November 26th. So it's the Tuesday, not the obviously Thanksgiving, but we'll have a little bit different date.
Okay.
Okay, sounds good. In that case, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robert, for